An Ark for All God's Knowers, a book published by Thomas Brooks, the Puritan, in 1662. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul, therefore will I hope in him. Lamentations chapter 3, verse 24. A matchless portion. Certainly if Ennius could pick out gold out of a dunghill, I may, by divine assistance, much better pick out golden matter out of such a golden mine as my text is, to enrich the souls of men withal. The best of painters, Apelles, to draw an exquisite Venus, had set before him 100 choice and selected beauties, to take from one an eye, another a lip, a third a smile, a fourth an hand, and from each of them that special lineament in which the most excelled. But I have no need of any other scripture to be set before me to draw forth the excellency of the saint's portion than that which I have now pitched upon. For the beauty, excellency, and glory of 100 choice scriptures are epitomized in this one. The Jewish doctors and other writers differ about the time of Jeremiah's penning this book of the Lamentations, but to be ignorant of the circumstance of time when this book was made is such a crime as I suppose will not be charged upon any man's account in the great day of our Lord Jesus. Doubtless this book of the Lamentations was composed by Jeremiah in the time of the Babylonian captivity. In this book the prophet sadly laments and bewails the grievous calamities and miseries that had befallen the Jews, namely the ruin of their state, the devastation of their land, the destruction of their glorious city and temple, which was the great wonder of the world, the profanation of all his holy things, the contemptible and deplorable condition of all sorts, ranks, and degrees of men, and then he complains of their sins as the procuring causes of all those calamities that God in his righteousness had inflicted upon them. He exhorts them also to patience under the mighty hand of God, and stirs them up to repent and reform, as they would have their sins pardoned, judgments removed, divine wrath pacified, their insulting enemies suppressed, and former acts and grants of favour and grace restored to them. But to come to the words of my text, the Lord Jehovah, from Hava, he was. This name Jehovah is the most proper name of God, and it is never attributed to any but to God. First, Jehovah sets out God's eternity, in that it containeth all times, future, present, and past, in that one name. Secondly, it sets out also God's self-existency, coming from Hava, to be. Thirdly, when either some special mercy is promised or some extraordinary judgment is threatened, then the name of Jehovah is commonly annexed, to show that God, whose being is from himself, and who gives a being to all his creatures, both on heaven and on earth, will certainly give a being to his promises and threatenings, and not fail to accomplish the words that are gone out of his mouth. Fourthly, this name Jehovah consists only of quiescent letters, i.e. letters of rest, as the Hebrews call them, to show that there is no rest till we come to Jehovah, and that in him we may safely and securely rest, as the dove did in Noah's ark. Is my portion, chelki, from chalak, the Hebrew word signifying to divide. He alludes, as I take it, to the dividing of the land of Canaan amongst the Israelites by lot. The Lord, saith he, is my portion, my part, my lot, and with this portion I rest fully satisfied, as the Israelites were to do with their parts and portions in that pleasant land. It is true, saith Jeremiah, in the name of the church, I am thus and thus afflicted, and sorely distressed on all hands, but yet the Lord is my portion, and that supports and bears up my spirits from fainting and sinking in this evil day. Saith my soul, nafshi, from nephesh, the Hebrew word, hath 9 several senses or significations in the Scripture, but let this suffice, that by soul, here in the text, we are to understand the heart, the mind, the spirit, and the understanding of a man. Well saith the prophet, though I am in a sea of sorrow and in a gulf of misery, yet my heart tells me that the Lord is my portion. My mind tells me that the Lord is my portion. My spirit tells me that the Lord is my portion. And my understanding tells me that the Lord is my portion. And therefore I will bear up bravely in the face of all calamities and miseries. Therefore will I hope in him. The Hebrew word that is here rendered hope is from yachal, that signifies both hoping, expecting, and trusting. Also it signifies a patient waiting upon the Lord. The prophet Jeremiah had not only a witness above him, but also a witness within him, that the Lord was his portion. And therefore he resolves firmly to hope in the Lord, and sweetly to trust on the Lord, and quietly and patiently to wait upon the Lord, till God should turn his storm into a calm, and his sad winter into a blessed summer. In my text there are three things observable. First, an assertion or proposition in those words, the Lord is my portion. Secondly, a proof of it in those words, saith my soul. Thirdly, the use or inference from the premises in those words, therefore will I hope in him. The words being thus opened, the proposition that I intend to insist upon is this, that the Lord is the saint's portion, the Lord is the believer's portion. I shall call in a few scriptures to witness to the truth of this proposition, and then I shall further open it to you. Psalm 16, the Lord is the portion of mine inheritance and of my cup. Thou maintainest my lot. Psalm 73, my flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. Psalm 119, thou art my portion, O Lord. I have said that I would keep thy words. Jeremiah 10, the portion of Jacob is not like them, for he is the former of all things, and Israel is the rod of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Now for further opening and clearing up of this great and glorious, this sweet and blessed truth, I shall endeavour to show you first what a portion the Lord is to his saints, to his gracious ones, and secondly the reasons or grounds whereupon the saints have laid claim to God as their portion. For the first, what a portion God is. Now the excellency of this portion I shall show you by an induction of particulars thus. First, God is a present portion. He is a portion in hand. He is a portion in possession. All the scriptures that are cited to prove the doctrine evidence this to be a truth. Psalm 48, Isaiah 25. And so doth that in Psalm 46 verse 1. God is a very present help in trouble. The Hebrew word, betzaroth, is in the plural number, troubles. That is, God is a present help in many troubles, in great troubles, and in continued troubles. Betzaroth is from tzor. That signifies to straiten and closely to besiege. It notes the extremity of affliction and trouble. Maximilian the emperor was so delighted with that sentence of Paul, "If God be with us, who shall be against us?" that he caused it to be written upon the walls in most rooms of his palace. When the people of God are in their greatest extremity, then God will be a present help, a present portion to them. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 2. When thou passest through the waters, I will be with thee, and through the rivers they shall not overflow thee. When thou walkest through the fire, thou shalt not be burnt, neither shall the flame kindle upon thee. God will be a present help, a present relief, a present support, a present comfort, a present portion to his people in all those great and various trials that they may be exercised under. Psalm 142. I cried unto thee, O Lord, I said, thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living. God is a portion in present possession, and not a portion in reversion. The psalmist doth not say, thou mayest be my portion in another world, but thou art my portion in the land of the living. Look, as Elkanah gave Hannah a worthy portion in hand in 1 Samuel 1, so God gives himself to his saints as a worthy portion in hand. Many men wait and wait long for their earthly portions before they enjoy them. Yea, their patience is oftentimes wore so threadbare in waiting that they wish their parents in Abraham's bosom. Ay, and sometimes in a worser place, that so they may inherit their honours, lordships, lands, treasures. Look, as a bird in the hand is worth 2, 10 in the bush, so a portion in possession is worth 2, 10 in reversion. Now God is a portion in present possession, and that speaks out the excellency of the saint's portion. As he in Plutarch said of the Scythians, that although they had no music nor vines among them, yet as a better thing they had gods. So I may say, though the saints have not this, nor that, nor the other earthly portion among them, yet as a better thing they have God for their present portion. And what can they desire more? But secondly, as God is a present portion, so God is an immense portion. He is a vast, large portion. He is the greatest portion of all portions. 1 Timothy 6, which in his times he shall show who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords. These words are a stately and lofty description of the greatness of God. The apostle heapeth up many words together to show that in greatness God excels all. Isaiah chapter 40, behold, the nations are as a drop of a bucket, and are counted as the small dust of the balance. Behold, he taketh up the isles as a very little thing, and Lebanon is not sufficient to burn, nor the beasts thereof sufficient for a burnt offering. All nations before him are as nothing, and they are counted to him less than nothing, and vanity. Not only one nation, but many nations, yea, not only many nations, but all nations in comparison of God are but as the drop of a bucket, and what is lesser than a drop, and as the small dust of a balance, and what is of lighter weight and lesser worth than the small dust or powder of the balance that hangs on the scale, and yet never alters the weight. Yea, they are nothing, they are less than nothing. And though Lebanon was a very great, spacious forest, and had abundance of beasts in it, yet God was a God of that infinite greatness, that though all the beasts harbouring in that stately forest should be slain, and all the wood growing on it cut down to burn them with it, all would not make up a sacrifice anyways answerable or proportionable to his greatness with whom they had to do. And so in Psalm 147, great is our Lord and of great power, his understanding is infinite. Or as the Hebrew hath it, of his understanding there is no number. Such is his greatness that he knows not only all kinds and sorts of things, but even all particulars, though they exceed all number. Psalm 145, great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. Or as the Hebrew hath it, of his greatness there is no search. God is infinitely above all names, all notions, all conceptions, all expressions, and all parallels. Psalm 150, verse 2, praise him for his mighty acts, praise him according to his excellent greatness, or greatness of greatness, or abundance of greatness, or according to the multitude of his greatness, as the Hebrew and Greek carries it. And so in Deuteronomy 10, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward. In Daniel, God is called El Elim, the mighty of mighties. God is the original cause of all greatness. All that greatness that is in any created beings, whether they are angels or men, is from God. All their greatness is but a beam of his sun, a drop out of his sea, a mite out of his treasury. God is a God of that infinite greatness that he fills heaven and earth with his presence. He is everywhere, and yet circumscribed to no place. He is in all things, and without all things, and above all things, and this speaks out his immensity. Psalm 139. Job had a very large portion before God made a breach upon him. He had 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a very great household in Job 1. But at last God gives him twice as much as he had at first. For he had 14,000 sheep, and 6,000 camels, and 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses, in Job 42. Cattle are only instanced in, because the wealth of that country consisted especially in cattle. But yet doubtless Job had a great many other good things, as goods, lands, possessions, and stately habitations. But what is all this to a saint's portion? Certainly had not Job had God for his portion, he had been but a rich fool, a golden beast, notwithstanding all the great things that God had heaped upon him. And so Ahasuerus had a very large portion. He reigned from India unto Ethiopia over 127 provinces in Esther chapter 1. But what were all his provinces but so many handfuls of dust in comparison of the saint's portion? The whole Turkish Empire, saith Luther, is but a crust that God throws to a dog. Had a man all the world for his portion, it would be but a poor pittance. Nebuchadnezzar had a very great portion. Daniel chapter 5, O thou king, the most high God gave thy father Nebuchadnezzar a kingdom and majesty and glory and honour, and for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would he slew, and whom he would he kept alive, and whom he would he set up, and whom he would he put down. And so in that Jeremiah chapter 27, I have made the earth, the man, and the beasts that are upon the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and I have given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. And now I have given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, my servant. And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all nations shall serve him, and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. And it shall come to pass that the nation and kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and that will not pass their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword, and with the famine, and with the pestilence, until I have consumed them by his hand. The portion that here God gives to Nebuchadnezzar is a wonderful large portion, and yet all these nations that God gave to him were but as so many molehills, or as so many birds' nests, compared with the saint's portion. All nations are but as a drop of a bucket, that may in a moment be wiped off with a finger, in comparison of God. Nay, they are all nothing. But that word is too high, for they are less than nothing. Had a man as many worlds at his command as there be men on earth, or angels in heaven, yet they would be but as so many drops, or as so many atoms to a saint's portion. When Alcibiades was proudly boasting of his lands that lay together, Socrates wittily rebukes his pride by bringing him a map of the world, and wishing him to show him where his lands did lie. His lands would hardly amount to more than the prick of a pin. England, Scotland, and Ireland are but 3 little spots to the vast continents that be in other parts of the world. And what then is thy palace, thy lordships, thy manors, thy farm, thy house, thy cottage, but a little minimum, but a prick of a pin to God, who is so great, so vast a portion? O sirs, had you the understanding of all the angels in heaven, and the tongues of all the men on earth, yet you would not be able to conceive, express, or set forth the greatness and largeness of a saint's portion. Can you tell the stars of heaven, or number the sands of the sea, or stop the sun in his course, or raise the dead, or make a new world? Then and not till then will you be able to declare what a great, what an immense portion God is. If eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath it entered into the heart of man to conceive the great things that God hath laid up in the gospel. For so 1 Corinthians 2 is to be understood. Oh, how much less then are they able to declare the great things that God hath laid up for his people in another world. But thirdly, as God is an immense portion, a large portion, so God is an all-sufficient portion. Genesis 17, and when Abram was 90 years old and 9, the Lord appeared to Abram and said unto him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect. I am God Almighty. Or as some carry the words, I am God all-sufficient, or self-sufficient. God hath self-sufficiency and all-sufficiency in himself. Some derive the word Shaddai, that is here rendered almighty or all-sufficient, from shad, a dug, because God feeds his children with sufficiency of all good things, as the tender mother doth the sucking child. Genesis 15, after these things the word of the Lord came unto Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. I will be thy buckler to defend thee from all kind of mischief and miseries, and I will be thy exceeding great reward to supply thee with all necessary and desirable mercies. And what can a saint desire more? Psalm 84, verse 11. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory, and no good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. The sun, which among all inanimate creatures is the most excellent, notes all manner of excellency, provision, and prosperity, and the shield, which among all artificial creatures is the chiefest, notes all manner of protection whatsoever. Under the name of grace all spiritual good is wrapped up, and under the name of glory all eternal good is wrapped up. And under the last clause, no good thing will he withhold, is wrapped up all temporal good. All put together speaks out God to be an all-sufficient portion. Before the world was made, before angels or men had a being, God was as blessed and as glorious in himself as now he is. God is such an all-sufficient and such an excellent being that nothing can be added to him to make him more excellent. Man in his best estate is so great a piece of vanity, Psalm 39, that he stands in need of 1,000,000 things. He needs the air to breathe in, the earth to bear him, and fire to warm him, and clothes to cover him, and an house to shelter him, and food to nourish him, and a bed to ease him, and friends to comfort him. But this is the excellency of God, that he hath all excellencies in himself, and stands in need of nothing. Were there as many worlds as there are men in the world, and were all those worlds full of blessed saints, yea, were there as many heavens as there are stars in heaven, and were all those heavens full of glorious angels, yet all these saints and angels together could not add the least to God. For what can drops taken out of the sea add unto the sea? What can finite creatures add to an infinite being? Though all the men in the world should praise the sun, and say the sun is a glorious creature, yet all this would add nothing to the light and glory of the sun. So though all the saints and angels shall be blessing and praising and admiring and worshipping of God to all eternity, yet they shall never be able to add anything to God, who is blessed forever. O Christians, God is an all-sufficient portion. His power is all-sufficient to protect you. His wisdom is all-sufficient to direct you. His mercy is all-sufficient to pardon you. His goodness is all-sufficient to provide for you. His word is all-sufficient to support you and strengthen you, and his grace is all-sufficient to adorn you and enrich you. And his Spirit is all-sufficient to lead you and comfort you. And what can you desire more? O sirs, God hath within himself all the good of angels, of men, and universal nature. He hath all glory, all dignity, all riches, all treasures, all pleasures, all delights, all comforts, all contents, all joys, all beatitudes in himself. All the scattered excellencies and perfections that be in the creatures are eminently, transcendently, and perfectly in him. Look, as the worth and value of many pieces of silver are contracted in one piece of gold, so all the whole volume of perfections, which is spread through heaven and earth, are epitomized in God, according to that old saying, omne bonum in summo bono. All good is in the chiefest good. God is omnia super omnia, and many of the very heathens counted God optimum maximum, the best and greatest. God is one infinite perfection in himself, which is eminently and virtually all perfections of the creatures. All the good, the excellency, the beauty and glory that is in all created beings are but parts of that whole that is in God. And all the good that is in them is borrowed and derived from God, who is the first cause and the universal cause of all that good that is in angels or men. God is a sufficient portion to secure your souls, and to supply all your wants, and to satisfy all your desires, and to answer all your expectations, and to suppress all your enemies, and after all to bring you to glory. And what can you desire more? But now all earthly portions are insufficient portions. They can neither prevent afflictions, nor support the soul under afflictions, nor mitigate afflictions, nor yet deliver a man from afflictions. They can neither arm the soul against temptations, nor comfort the soul under temptations, nor lead the soul out of temptations. A golden crown cannot cure the headache, nor a purple robe cannot fray away a burning fever, nor a bed of gold cannot give ease to a distempered body, nor the velvet slipper cannot take away the pain of the gout. All the creatures in the world are but as so many ciphers without God. When God frowns, all the creatures in the world are not sufficient to cheer the soul. When God withdraws, all the creatures in the world are not sufficient to sustain the soul. When God clouds his face, all the creatures in the world are not sufficient to make it day with the soul. There is not enough in the whole creation to content, quiet, or satisfy one immortal soul. He that hath most of the world would have more, and he that hath least of the world hath enough, if his soul can but groundedly say, the Lord is my portion. But fourthly, as the Lord is an all-sufficient portion, so the Lord is a most absolute, needful, and necessary portion. The want of an earthly portion may trouble me, but the want of God for my portion will damn me. It is not absolutely necessary that I should have a portion in gold, or silver, or jewels, or goods, or lands, but it is absolutely necessary that I should have God for my portion. I may have union and communion with God, though with the apostles I have neither gold nor silver in my purse. Acts chapter 3. I may be holy and happy, though with Lazarus, in Luke 16, I have never a rag to hang on my back, nor never a dry crust put into my belly. I may to heaven at last, and may be glorious in another world, though with Job I should be stripped of all my worldly glory, and set upon a dunghill in this world. Job chapter 1. But I can never be happy here, nor blessed hereafter, except God be my portion. Though I could truly say that all the world were mine, yet if I could not truly say that the Lord is my portion, I should be but miserable under all my worldly enjoyments. To have God for my portion is absolutely necessary, for without it I am forever and ever undone. Ephesians 2. In this verse you have several withouts, and it is very observable that they that were without God in the world, they were without Christ, without the church, without the covenant, without the promise, and without hope in the world. and therefore such persons must needs be in a most sad and deplorable condition. First, in relation to the soul and in relation to salvation, God is the most absolute necessary portion. If God be not my portion, my soul can never enjoy communion with him in this world. If God be not my portion, my soul can never be saved by him in the other world. But secondly, when sinners are under terrors and horrors of conscience, when their consciences are awakened and convinced of the vileness of their natures, of the unspeakable evil that is in sin, yea, in the least sin, and of their lost, undone, and miserable estate out of Christ, oh, then what would they not give to have God for their portion? Oh, then they would give all the gold and silver they have in the world to have God for their portion. Oh, then they would give thousands of rams and 10,000s of rivers of oil. Yea, they would give their firstborn. They would give the very fruit of their bodies, that they might have God to be the portion of their souls. Micah chapter 6. Oh, then they would say as Mephibosheth said unto the king, Let Ziba take all, for as much as my lord the king is come again in peace unto his own house. 2 Samuel 19. Under distress of conscience, poor sinners will cry out, Oh, let who will take all our honours, and all our manors, and all our treasures, and all our stores, and all our lands, and all our lordships, and all our bags, so we may have God for our portion. Oh, let us but have God for our portion, and we care not a straw who takes all. Now what doth this speak out but that of all portions God is the most absolute necessary portion? But thirdly, upon a dying bed, an awakened sinner sets the highest price, value, and esteem upon such as have God for their portion. Now he esteems a saint in rags that hath God for his portion above a wicked emperor in his royal robes, who hath only the world for his portion. What though wicked men, when they are in the height of their worldly prosperity, felicity, and glory, do slight the saints, and revile and scorn the saints, and contemn and undervalue the saints, Lamentations 2 and Zephaniah 2. Yet when death knocks at their doors, and when their consciences are startled, and when hell fire flashes in their faces, and when the worm within begins to gnaw, oh, now, if all the world were a lump of gold, and in their hands to dispose of, they would give it all, so they might have that honour and happiness to change conditions with those who have God for their portion. Numbers 23, Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like his. Though men who have their portion in this life do not love to live the life of the righteous, yet when they come to die, they are often desirous that they might die the death of the righteous. And this many hundred ministers and Christians can witness from their own experience. Lazarus, having God for his portion, when he died, he went to heaven without a rag on his back or a penny in his purse. Whereas Dives, who had not God for his portion, when he died, went tumbling down to hell in all his riches, bravery, and glory. Oh, it is infinitely better to go to heaven a beggar than to go to hell an emperor. And this the sinner understands when his conscience comes to be enlightened upon a dying bed, and therefore he cries out, Oh, send for such a minister, and send for such and such a Christian, and let them pray with me and counsel me, and, if it be possible, give out some drops of comfort to me. Oh, that I had never derided nor reviled them. Oh, that I had never opposed and persecuted them. Oh, that I had lived at such a rate of holiness and exactness as they have done. Oh, that I had walked with God as they have walked. Oh, that I had laid out my time, my strength, my treasure, my parts, my all for God as they have done. Oh, that my estate was as good, as safe, and as happy as theirs is. Oh, that I could as truly say that the Lord is my portion as they can say that the Lord is their portion. And what doth all this speak out, but that high esteem and value that they set upon those that have God for their portion? So that upon this threefold account we may safely conclude that God is a most absolute, needful, and necessary portion. But fifthly, as the Lord is a most absolute, needful, and necessary portion, so the Lord is a pure and unmixed portion. God is an unmixed good. He hath nothing in him but goodness. He is an ocean of sweetness without one drop of bitterness. He is a perfect beauty without the least spot or shadow of deformity. Deuteronomy 32 and Habakkuk chapter 1. All other portions are a bitter sweet. But God is a rose without prickles. He is a good in which there is not the least evil. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. 1 John chapter 1. There are no mixtures in God. God is a most clear, bright, shining light. Yea, he is all light, and in him is no darkness at all. God is all light and all love, all sweetness and all goodness, all kindness and all graciousness, and there is no uncomeliness, no unloveliness, no bitterness, nor no darkness at all in God. The moon, when it shines brightest, hath her dark spots and specks, but God is a light that shines most gloriously, without the least spot or speck. God is a most pure, clear, splendid light. It is very observable that the apostle, to illustrate the perfect purity of God, adds a negative to his affirmative. In him is no darkness at all. That is, God is so pure that not the least spot, the smallest speck of vanity or folly can cleave to him. God is a most pure act, without the least potentiality, defectibility, or mutability, and therefore in the highest sense he is light, and in him is no darkness at all. By this metaphorical description of God, the apostle would not have us think that the nature of God is changed into the nature of light, but by this similitude the apostle would represent something of the purity and excellency of God to us. The sun is light, the moon is light, and the stars are light. But it would be blasphemy for us to imagine that the essence of God is the same with this of the creatures. But this, sirs, you must remember that there are many excellent properties of light, for which God is often in the Scripture resembled to light. As first, light is pure, and so is God. Habakkuk chapter 1, thou art of purer eyes than to behold evil, and canst not look on iniquity. There are 4 things that God cannot do. He cannot lie, he cannot die, he cannot deny himself, nor he cannot look with a favourable eye upon iniquity. He is a God of that infinite purity that he cannot look upon iniquity but with an hateful eye, an angry eye, a revengeful eye, and with a vindictive eye. Secondly, all things are conspicuous to the light, and so they are to God. Psalm 41, 1 Samuel 2, and so on. God is totus oculus, all eye. Athenodorus, a heathen, could say that God was everywhere, and beheld all that was done. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and opened unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. Hebrews chapter 4. The Greek word is a metaphor, say some, that is taken from the priests under the law, who when they killed the beasts for sacrifice, all things that were within the beasts were laid naked and bare before the priest, that so he might see what was sound and what was corrupted. Others, say the apostle, alludes to the anatomizing of such creatures, wherein men are very cautious and curious to find out every little vein or muscle, though they lie never so close. Others say that it is a metaphor taken from those that lie with their faces upwards, that all passengers might see who they are. All agree in this, that all men's insides and outsides are anatomized, dissected, quartered, and laid naked to the eye of God. Job 34, for his eyes are upon the ways of man, and he seeth all his goings. There is no darkness nor shadow of death where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves. If thou canst not hide thyself from the sun, which is God's minister of light, how impossible will it be to hide thyself from him whose eyes are 10,000 times brighter than the sun, saith Ambrose. But thirdly, without light nothing can be seen. So without the beams of heavenly light, no heavenly things can be seen. A man cannot see God, but in that light that comes down from above. A man cannot see Christ without he be first enlightened by Christ. A man cannot see heaven, but in that light that comes from heaven. James chapter 1 and 1 Corinthians 2. Were it not for the sun, it would be perpetual night in the world, notwithstanding all the torches that could be lighted, yea, notwithstanding all the light of the moon and stars. So it would be perpetual night with poor souls, notwithstanding all the torchlight of natural parts and creature comforts, and notwithstanding all the starlight of civil honesty and common gifts, and notwithstanding all the moonlight of temporary faith and formal profession, did not the Sun of Righteousness arise and shine upon them. But fourthly, there is nothing more pleasant than the light. Ecclesiastes 11, truly the light is sweet, and it is a very pleasant thing to behold the sun. A philosopher, being asked whether it were not a pleasant thing to behold the sun, answered that it was a blind man's question, because life without light is but a lifeless life. Now as there is nothing more pleasant and delightful to the eye than light, so there is nothing more pleasant and delightful to the soul than God. The poor northern nations in Strabo, that want the light of the sun for some months together, when the term of his return approaches, they climb up into the highest mountains to spy it. And he that spies it first was accounted the best and most beloved of God. They chose him king almost as the Tyrians did Strato. Now the return of the sun is not more pleasant and delightful to those poor northern nations than God is pleasant and delightful to all gracious souls. But fifthly, the light shines and scatters its rays over all the world, over east, west, north, and south, and so doth the presence and goodness of God. Psalm 139. But sixthly, the light is a creature of a most resplendent beauty, lustre, and glory. It dazzles the eyes of the beholders, and so God is a God of that transcendent beauty, majesty, and glory that the very eyes of the angels are dazzled, as not being able to behold the brightness of his glory. In Isaiah 6, God dwells in that light which no man can approach unto. But seventhly and lastly, the light of all bodies is the most incompound light. It will never mix with darkness, no more will God. 2 Corinthians 6, what communion hath light with darkness? The nature of God is void of all composition. Light expels darkness, it never mixes or mingles with it. By what has been said, you see that God is a pure and an unmixed light, and that in him there is no darkness at all. But now all worldly portions are mixed with many troubles, sorrows, cares, fears, hazards, dangers, vexations, oppositions, crosses, losses, and oftentimes with many gripes of conscience too. All earthly portions are mixed portions. The goodness of all creatures is a mixed goodness. Our wine is mixed with water, our silver with tin, our gold with dross, our wheat with chaff, and our honey with gall. Every bee hath his sting, and every rose hath his prickles. And this mixture speaks out all earthly portions to be vanity and vexation of spirit. Ecclesiastes 1. All earthly riches are true gardens of Adonis, where we can gather nothing but trivial flowers, surrounded with many briars and thorns. That great prince Xerxes was wont to say, "You look upon my crown and my purple robes, but did you know how they were lined with thorns? You would not stoop to take them up." And who is there in this our English Israel that cannot with both hands subscribe to this? The emblem of King Henry VII, in all his buildings and the windows, was still a crown in a bush of thorns. Wherefore, or with what historical allusion he did so, is uncertain, but certainly it was to imply thus much, that great places are not free from great cares, that no man knows the weight of a sceptre but he that sways it. This made Saul to hide himself amongst the stuff, when he should have been made king. Many a sleepless night, many a restless day, many a sad temptation, and many a busy shift will their ambition cost them that affect such places of eminency. Besides, high places are commonly very slippery. He that stands in them may suddenly fall and wound his conscience, or easily fall and break his neck. But sixthly, as God is a pure and unmixed portion, so he is a glorious, a happy, and a blessed portion. Psalm 16. He is so in himself, and he makes them so too who enjoy him for their portion. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. Psalm 33. All the happiness and blessedness of the people of God stands in this, that God is their God, and that he is their portion, and that they are his inheritance. The Hebrew word ashrei, that is here rendered blessed, is oh the blessedness, or oh the heaped up happiness of those whose God is the Lord. The happiness of such is so great and so glorious as cannot be conceived, as cannot be uttered. The words are a joyful acclamation for their felicity that have God for their portion. Psalm 144 ends, Happy is that people that is in such a case, yea, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. David, having prayed for many temporal blessings in the behalf of the people, from verse 12 to verse 15, at last concludes, Blessed are the people that are in such a case. But pleasantly he checks and corrects himself, and eats, as it were, his own words. But rather, happy is that people whose God is the Lord. The Syriac rendereth it question-wise. Is not the people happy that is in such a case? The answer is, no, except they have God to boot. Nothing can make that man truly miserable that hath God for his portion, nor nothing can make that man truly happy that wants God for his portion. God is the author of all true happiness. He is the donor of all true happiness. He is the maintainer of all true happiness, and he is the centre of all true happiness and blessedness. And therefore he that hath him for his God, for his portion, is the only happy man in the world. If a man should make a critical inquiry after true happiness, from the highest angel in heaven to the lowest worm on earth, the joint voice of all the creatures would be that happiness is not in them. But now all earthly portions cannot make a man truly happy and blessed. A crown, a kingdom cannot, for Saul and other princes have found it so. Honours cannot, for Haman and others have found it so. A high and noble birth cannot, for Absalom, Amnon and others have found it so. Riches cannot, for the rich fool in the gospel and many thousand others have found it so. Large dominions and great commands cannot, for Ahasuerus, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar and others have found it so. Policy cannot, for Ahithophel and other great counsellors have found it so. Glorious apparel and delicate fare cannot, for Dives and others have found it so. Applause and credit among the people cannot, for Herod and others have found it so. Learning and great gifts cannot, for the scribes and Pharisees and many others have found it so. No earthly thing nor earthly creature can give happiness nor blessedness to man. Non dat quod non habet. Nothing can give what it hath not. If the conduit hath no water, it can give no water. If the sun hath no light, it can give no light. If the physician hath no remedy, he can give no remedy. But now it is a very true observation, though it be a very sad observation, that every wicked man's portion is cursed unto him. Do but compare the scriptures in the margin together, from Deuteronomy 38 and verses 17 to 20, Job 20 verses 22 to 29, and so on. And then let conscience judge. All a wicked man's relations are cursed to him, and all a wicked man's contentments and enjoyments are cursed to him, and all his mercies within doors are cursed to him. What though a man should match with one that hath many 1,000 bags of gold for her portion? Yet if the plague should be in every bag, would you count him happy in this match? Surely no. Verily this is the case of every man that hath not God for his portion. But seventhly, as God is a glorious portion, so he is a peculiar portion. He is a portion peculiar to his people. Psalm 142 and Jeremiah 10. This is evident in the text, and in all the scriptures cited to prove the point. Then shall the earth yield her increase, and God, even our own God, shall bless us. Psalm 67. And so also Psalm 68. He that is our God is the God of salvation, or God of salvations, as it is in the Hebrew. God is a God of all manner of salvations. He hath all sorts and ways of salvations. He is not only powerful, but also skilful to save his people from 10,000 deaths and dangers. Faith is an appropriating grace. It is much in appropriating of God to itself. My Lord and my God, and my Redeemer and my Saviour, and my portion. Psalm 73 verse 26, My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion for ever. In Gideon's camp every soldier had his own pitcher. Amongst Solomon's men of valour every man wore his own sword, and the 5 wise virgins had every one oil in her own lamp. Luther was wont to say that there lay a great deal of divinity couched up in pronouns, as in meum, tuum, suum, mine, thine, his, and so faith's appropriating of God to the soul as its own portion is all in all. God is a portion peculiar to the saints. He is the hidden manna, the new name, the white stone, the bread to eat that others know not of. There is never a hardened Pharaoh in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a murdering Saul in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a painted, bloody Jezebel in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a cunning Ahithophel in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a proud Haman in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a tyrannical Nebuchadnezzar in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a crafty Herod in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a rich Dives in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a treacherous Judas in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never an hypocritical Simon Magus in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never an apostatizing Demas in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. Nor there is never a persecuting scribe or Pharisee in the world that can truly say, The Lord is my portion. It is only the saint that can truly say, The Lord is his portion, for God is peculiarly his. He is only his. But now all earthly portions are common portions. They are all common to good and bad, to the righteous and to the wicked, to the clean and to the unclean, to him that sacrificeth and to him that sacrificeth not, to him that sweareth and to him that feareth an oath. Ecclesiastes 9. Was Abraham rich? So was Dives too. Was David a king? So was Saul too. Was Daniel a great favourite at court? So was Haman too. And indeed, usually the basest and worst of men have the largest share in earthly portions, which made Luther say that the whole Turkish Empire was but a crust that God cast to a dog. Abraham gave unto his sons of the concubines gifts, and sent them away. But unto Isaac he gave all that he had in Genesis 25. So all earthly portions, which are giftless gifts, God gives them to the worst and vilest of men. Daniel chapter 4, this matter is by decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. And so in that Daniel chapter 11, and in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honour of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Interpreters do generally agree that by this vile person in the text is meant Antiochus Epiphanes, that was so great and mighty a prince that when the Samaritans did write to him, they wrote Antiocho Magno Deo, to Antiochus the great God. And indeed his very name speaks him out to be some great and glorious person, for Antiochus Epiphanes is Antiochus the illustrious, the famous. And yet you see that the Holy Ghost, speaking of him, calls him a vile person. Ah, how vile in the eyes of God are the greatest men in the world, who have not God for their portion. Augustus in his solemn feasts gave trifles to some, but gold to others. God gives the trifling portions of this world to the vilest and worst of men, but his gold, his Christ, himself he gives only to his saints. Galatians 2:20, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Haws, the fruit of the hawthorn that are for hogs, grow upon every hedge, but roses that are for men, they only grow in pleasant gardens. You know how to apply it. Though many have counterfeit jewels, yet there are but a few that have the true diamond. Though many have their earthly portions, yet there are but a few that have God for their portion. But eighthly, as God is a peculiar portion, so he is a universal portion. He is a portion that includes all other portions. God hath himself the good, the sweet, the profit, the pleasure, the delight, the comfort of all portions. There is no good in wife, child, father, friend, husband, health, wealth, wit, wisdom, learning, honour, but is all found in God. Revelation 21 verse 7, He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Or as the Greek hath it, he that is overcoming, though he hath not yet overcome, yet if he be striving for the conquest, and will rather die than he will give up the bucklers, he shall inherit all things. That is, he shall inherit God in all, and all in God. Genesis chapter 33 verse 9, And Esau said, I have enough, my brother, keep that thou hast unto thyself. As the Hebrew hath it, lirab, I have much, my brother. And indeed it was very much that an Esau could say he had much. It is more than many of the Esau's of these times will say. But Jacob speaks at a far higher rate in verse 11. Take, I pray thee, my blessing that is brought to thee, because God hath dealt graciously with me, because I have enough, or rather, as the Hebrew hath it, lichol, I have all. Esau had much, but Jacob had all, because he had all in God, and God in all. Habet omnia qui habet habentem omnia. He hath all that hath the haver of all. 2 Corinthians 6 verse 10, as having nothing, and yet possessing all things. There is in God an immense fullness, an ocean of goodness, and an overplus of all that graciousness, sweetness, and kindness that is to be found in all other things or creatures. As Noah had a copy of every kind of creature in that famous library of the ark, out of which all were reprinted to the world, so he that hath God for his portion hath the original copy of all blessings, out of which all may easily be renewed. All the goodlinesses and all the glories of all the creatures are eminently and perfectly to be enjoyed in God. God is an universal excellency. All the peculiar excellencies that are scattered up and down among angels, men, and all other creatures are virtually and transcendently in him. He hath them all in his own being. Ephesians 1 and verse 3. When Paulinus Nolanus, a great man, had his city taken away from him by the barbarians, he prayed thus, Lord, let me not be troubled at the loss of my gold, silver, honour, for thou art all, and much more than all these to me. All creatures in heaven and earth have but their particular excellencies, but God hath in himself the very quintessence of all excellencies. The creatures have but drops of that sea, that ocean that is in God. They have but their parts of that power, wisdom, goodness, righteousness, holiness, faithfulness, loveliness, desirableness, sweetness, graciousness, beauty and glory that is in God. One hath this part, and another hath that. One hath this particular excellency, and another hath that. But the whole of all these parts and excellencies are to be found only in God. There is none but that God, that is an universal good, that can truly say all power, all wisdom, all strength, all knowledge, all goodness, all sweetness, all beauty, all glory, all excellency dwells in me. He that can truly say this is a God, and he that cannot is no God. There is no angel in heaven, nor saint on earth, that hath the whole of any one of those excellencies that are in God. Nay, all the angels in heaven, and all the saints on earth, have not among them the whole of any one of those glorious excellencies and perfections that be in God. All the excellencies that are scattered up and down in the creatures are united into one excellency in God. But there is not one excellency in God that is fully scattered up and down among all the creatures. There is a glorious union of all excellencies in God, and only in God. Now this God that is such an universal good, and that hath all excellencies dwelling in himself, he says to the believer, as the king of Israel said to the king of Assyria, I am thine, and all that I have, in 1 Kings 20. Now this God that is such an universal good, and that hath all excellencies dwelling in himself, he says to the believer, as the king of Israel said to the king of Assyria, I am thine, and all that I have, in 1 Kings chapter 20. Our propriety reacheth to all that God is, and to all that God hath, in Jeremiah 32. God is not parted, nor divided, nor distributed among his people, as earthly portions are divided among children in the family. So as one believer hath one part of God, and another believer hath another part of God, and a third another part of God. Oh no, but every believer hath whole God, holy. He hath all of God for his portion. God is not a believer's portion in a limited sense, nor in a comparative sense, but in an absolute sense. God himself is theirs. He is wholly theirs. He is only theirs. He is always theirs. As Christ looks upon the Father and saith, All thine is mine, and mine is thine, 1 Corinthians 3:28, and John chapter 17 verse 10. That may a saint say, looking upon God as his portion. He may truly say, O Lord, thou art mine, and all that thou hast, and I am thine, and all that I have. A saint may look upon God and say, O Lord, not only thy gifts, but thy graces are mine, to adorn me and enrich me, and not only thy mercies and thy good things are mine, to comfort me and encourage me, but also thou thyself art mine. And this is my joy and crown of rejoicing. To be able to say that God is mine is more than if I were able to say that 10,000 worlds, yea, and as many heavens are mine. For it is God alone that is the sparkling diamond in the ring of glory. Heaven would be but a low thing without God, saith Augustine, and Bernard hath rather enjoyed Christ in a chimney corner than to be in heaven without him. And Luther had rather be in hell with Christ than in heaven without him. It is God alone that makes heaven to be heaven. Now God is so every particular believer's portion, as that he is every believer's portion. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Paul, called to be an apostle of Jesus Christ, through the will of God, and Sosthenes, our brother, unto the church of God which is at Corinth, to them that are sanctified in Christ Jesus, called to be saints, with all that in every place call upon the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, both theirs and ours. As the sun is every man's sun to see by, to walk by, to work by, and the sea is every man's sea to trade by, and so on, so God is every believer's portion. He is a poor saint's portion, as well as a rich saint's portion. He is the despised believer's portion, as well as the exalted believer's portion. He is the weak believer's portion, as well as the strong believer's portion. He was as much his portion who miscalled his faith, and who in the behalf of his Son cried out with tears, Lord, I believe, help mine unbelief, in Mark 11, as he was Abraham's portion, who in the strength of his faith offered up his only son, in Genesis chapter 22. He was as much Job's portion, sitting on a dunghill, as he was David's portion, sitting on a royal throne. He was as much Lazarus's portion, that had never a penny in his purse, as he was Solomon's portion, who made gold and silver as plenteous in Jerusalem as the stones of the streets. 2 Chronicles 1:15. God is not my portion alone, but he is every saint's portion in heaven, and he is every saint's portion on earth. The Father is every child's portion, and though they may wrangle and quarrel and fall out one with another, yet he is all their portions, and so it is here. And oh, what a spring of joy and comfort should this be to all the saints. Riches are not every believer's portion, but God is every believer's portion. Honour and preferment in the world is not every believer's portion, but God is every believer's portion. Liberty and freedom is not every believer's portion, but God is every believer's portion. Credit and applause in the world is not every believer's portion, but God is every believer's portion. Prosperity and success is not every believer's portion, but God is every believer's portion, and so on. God is a universal portion. All things receive their being, essence, and existence from him. For the fullness of all things is in him, really and eminently. The heathen philosophers of old called God To Pan, i.e. all or everything, and in that oracle great Pan is dead, of which Plutarch makes mention. Christ is called the greater Pan, because, say some, he is the Lord of all, and containeth all things in himself. In Exodus 33 verse 19, I will make all my goodness pass before thee, to wit, because in God are all good things. God is all things. God is everything. The cream, the good, the sweet, the beauty and the glory of every creature and of everything centres in God. But ninthly, as God is an universal portion, so God is a safe portion, a secure portion. He is a portion that none can rob or wrong you of. He is a portion that none can touch or take from you. He is a portion that none can cheat or spoil you of. God is such a portion that no friend, no foe, no man, no enemy, no devil can ever rob a Christian of. O Christians, God is so yours in Christ, and so yours by covenant, and so yours by promise, and so yours by purchase, and so yours by conquest, and so yours by donation, and so yours by marriage union and communion, and so yours by the earnest of the Spirit, and so yours by the feelings and witnessings of the Spirit, that no power or policy on earth can ever finger your portion, or cheat or rob you of your portion. Psalm 48 verse 14, For this God is our God for ever and ever, and he will be our guide even unto death. He is not only our God for the present, nor will he be only our God for a short time longer. Oh no, but he will be our God for ever and ever. If God be once thy portion, he will be forever thy portion. It must be a power that must overmatch the power of God, and a strength that must be above the strength of God, that must rob or spoil a Christian of his portion. But who is there that is stronger than God? Is the clay stronger than the potter, or the stubble than the flame, or weakness than strength? Yea, is not the very weakness of God stronger than man? And who then shall ever be able to take away a Christian's portion from him? As we read in Romans 9 and 1 Corinthians 1 and chapter 10. But now a man may be easily deprived of his earthly portion. How many have been deprived of their earthly portions by storms at sea, and others by force and violence, and others by fraud and deceit, and others by hideous lying and hellish swearing. Many have lost their earthly portions by treachery, knavery, perjury, subtlety, robbery, etc. Some play away their earthly portions, and others with Esau fool away their earthly portions, and not a few with the prodigal sin away their earthly portions. Ahab's fingers itch to be a fingering of Naboth's vineyard. A man can no sooner come to enjoy an earthly portion, but other men's fingers itch to be a fingering of his portion, as daily experience doth sufficiently evidence. But God is a portion that the fire cannot burn, nor the floods cannot drown, nor the thief cannot steal, nor the enemy cannot sequester, nor the soldier cannot plunder a Christian of. A man may take away my gold from me, but he cannot take away my God from me. The Chaldeans and the Sabeans could take away Job's estate from him, but they could not take away Job's God from him. And the Amalekites burnt Ziklag and robbed David of his substance and of his wives, but they could not rob him of his God in 1 Samuel 30. And those persecutors in the 10th and 11th chapters of the Hebrews plundered the saints of their goods, but they could not plunder them of their God. Till weakness can make a breach upon strength, impotency upon omnipotency, the pitcher upon the potter, and the crawling worm upon the Lord of hosts, a saint's portion is safe and secure. It is true, sickness and disease may take away my health and my strength from me, and death may take away my friends and my relations from me, and enemies may take away my estate, my liberty, my life from me, but none of all these can take away my God from me. I have read of the men of Tyrus, how that they chained and nailed their god Apollo to a post, so they might be sure of him, supposing that all their safety lay in the enjoyment of him. Certainly God is so chained and so linked and so nailed to his people by his everlasting love and by his everlasting covenant and by the blood of his Son and by his oath and by that law of relation that is between him and them, that no created power shall ever be able to deprive them of him. But tenthly, as God is a safe portion, a secure portion, so he is a suitable portion. Psalm 4 verses 6 and 7. No object is so suitable and adequate to the heart as he is. He is a portion that punctually, exactly and directly suits the condition of the soul, that suits the desires of the soul, the necessities of the soul, the wants of the soul, the longings of the soul, and the prayers of the soul. The soul can crave nothing, nor wish for nothing, but what God is to be found in this portion. There is light to enlighten the soul, and wisdom to counsel the soul, and power to support the soul, and goodness to supply the soul, and mercy to pardon the soul, and beauty to delight the soul, and glory to ravish the soul, and fullness to fill the soul, and so on. Health is not more suitable to the sick man, nor wealth to the poor man, nor bread to the hungry man, nor drink to the thirsty man, nor clothes to the naked man, nor balm to the wounded man, nor ease to the tormented man, nor health to the diseased man, nor a pardon to the condemned man, nor a guide to the blind man, and so on, then this portion is suitable to all the necessities of man. And this speaks out the excellency of this portion above all other portions. Now there is no earthly portion that can suit an immortal soul. He is a fool upon record that said, Soul, thou hast goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. In Luke chapter 12. If the man, saith Ambrose upon the words, had the soul of a swine, what could he have said more? For those things were more suitable to swine than they were to an immortal soul. Man's soul is a spiritual and immortal substance. It is capable of union and communion with God. It is capable of a choice enjoyment of God here and of an eternal fruition of God hereafter. A great shoe will not fit a little foot, nor a great sail a little ship, nor a great ring a little finger. No more will any earthly portion suit an immortal soul. The soul is the breath of God, the beauty of man, the wonder of angels, and the envy of devils. It is of an angelical nature. It is an heavenly spark, a celestial plant, and of a divine offspring, so that nothing can suit the soul below God, nor nothing can satisfy the soul without God. The soul is so high and so noble a piece that all the riches of the East and West Indies, nor rocks of diamonds, nor mountains of gold can fill it, or satisfy it, or suit it. When a man is in prison and condemned to die, if one should come to him and tell him that there is such a friend or such a relation that hath left him a very fair estate, a brave seat, and so on, yet all this would not please him, nor joy him, because it doth not suit his present condition. Oh, but now let a man bring him his portion, sealed under his prince's hand. Oh, how will this delight him and enjoy him? And so tell a man that is ready to starve that such and such loves him, and that such and such intends well towards him, and so on. Yet all this doth not take him, it doth not satisfy him, and all because it doth not suit him. Oh, but now do but bring him food to eat, and this will joy him and delight him, and all because it suits him. That is the highest good. That is the most suitable good to the soul, and such a good is God. That is the most excellent portion. That is the most suitable portion to the soul, and such a portion is God. But 11thly, as God is a suitable portion, so he is an incomprehensible portion. No created understanding can comprehend what a portion God is. It is true, God is not incomprehensible in regard of his own understanding, for he perfectly understands himself, else he could not be God. But God is incomprehensible in regard of us and the angels, who are no ways able to comprehend infiniteness. 1 Kings chapter 8. But will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, the heaven and the heaven of heavens cannot contain thee. How much less this house that I have builded? Aristotle, that great secretary of nature, being not able to comprehend the reason of the sea's ebbing and flowing, cast himself into it. Oh, how much less able was he to comprehend God, blessed for ever. God is an infinite being, and therefore he cannot be contained in any place, nor comprehended by any created being. Such multiplied phrases and Hebraisms as are here, as heaven and the heaven of heavens, do very emphatically set out the immensity and incomprehensibleness of God. As Job says in chapter 37, touching the Almighty we cannot find him out. We are as well able to comprehend the sea in a cockle shell as we are able to comprehend God. God is above all name, all notion, and all comprehension. God is so incomprehensible that you shall as soon tell the stars of heaven, and number the sand of the sea, and stop the sun in his course, and raise the dead, and make a world, as you shall be able to comprehend the infiniteness of God's essence. Psalm 145. His greatness is unsearchable. The most perfect knowledge that we can have of God is that we cannot perfectly know him, because we do know him to be infinitely and incomprehensibly perfect. Romans 11. Oh, the depth both of the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments! and his ways past finding out. When men and angels do search farthest into God's perfection, they do then most of all discover their own imperfection. For it is utterly impossible for angels or men by their most accurate disquisition to find out the Almighty to perfection. 1 Timothy 6, verse 16, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen, nor can see. Here is a denial both of the fact and the possibility. It is a good observation of Chrysostom on the words, "Observe the diligence of Paul." He doth not say a light incomprehensible, but a light inaccessible, which is much more. For that which, being sought and searched for, cannot be comprehended, we say is incomprehensible. But that which suffereth not by any means the labour of searching after, and which no one can come near, that is inaccessible. There is infinitely more in God than the tongues of men or angels can express. If one man had all the reason, gifts, graces, and excellencies that are in angels and men, yet would he never be able to comprehend an incomprehensible God. There is much in God beyond the apprehension and comprehension of all created beings. The sum of all that philosophers and schoolmen have attained to concerning this great principle amounts to no more than this, that men and angels can never comprehend that perfection which dwells in God, for the perfection of God is infinite and therefore incomprehensible. God, saith Dionysius, is a supersubstantial substance, an understanding not to be understood, a word never to be spoken. When one was asked what God was, he answered that he must be God himself before he could know God fully. When the tyrant Hiero asked the poet Simonides what God was, he craved a day to study an answer. But the more he sought into the nature of God, the more difficult he found it to express. The next day, after being questioned, he asked 2 days, and the third time he craved 4, and so went on, doubling the number. And being asked why he did so, he answered that the more he studied the nature of God, the less he was able to define what God was. He being so incomprehensible in his nature, the more this poor heathen inquired, the more he admired, and the less he understood. It was a notable observation of Chrysostom, who being very busy and studious in searching into the nature of God, saith, I am like a man digging in a deep spring. I stand here, and the water riseth upon me, and I stand there, and still the water riseth upon me. Indeed, this is a knowledge that passeth knowledge. The Turks build their mosques or churches without any roof, because they hold as we do that God is incomprehensible. God is a circle whose centre is everywhere, and whose circumference is nowhere, all which speaks out his infiniteness and incomprehensibleness. But now all earthly portions are easily apprehended and comprehended. A portion in money or plate, or goods or lands or jewels, is easily cast up, and so many hundreds or thousands a year are quickly told. There are few, except it be children or fools, but can readily give an account of all earthly portions. The child's portion, and the wife's portion, and the servant's portion, and the soldier's portion, and the poor man's portion, and the rich man's portion, are talked on all the city over, and all the town over, and all the country over. But God is such an incomprehensible portion, that there is not a man in town, city, or country that is able to comprehend him. But twelfthly, as God is an incomprehensible portion, so God is an inexhaustible portion, a portion that can never be spent, that can never be exhausted, a fountain that still overflows, a rich mine that hath no bottom, a spring that can never be drawn dry, but continues always full, without augmentation or diminution. John chapter 4. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst, but the water that I shall give him shall be a well of water springing up into everlasting life. If grace in the soul be such a perpetual flowing fountain that it shall never be exhausted till grace be swallowed up in glory, then certainly the God of grace is much more an inexhaustible fountain that can never be drawn dry. Angels, saints, and sinners have lived upon this portion almost this 6,000 years, and it is not in the least diminished. Colossians chapter 1. God hath his city house and his country house, where millions have been kept at his table and lived upon his purse, his charge, even days without number, and yet God is not one penny the poorer for all this. This portion is like the meal in the barrel and the oil in the cruse which never failed in 1 Kings 17. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail, until the day that the Lord sendeth rain upon the earth. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord which he spake by Elijah. God is such a portion as cannot be wasted, nor diminished. He is such a portion as can never fail. Should all Christians now live to the age of the patriarchs who lived many 100 years, and should they all live freely and keep open house every day in the year, yet at the end not a dram, not a penny, no, not a farthing of this portion will be expended or diminished. Though men have never so great a stock, yet if they still spend upon it, they will certainly consume it. Oh, but God is such a stock as can never be spent, as can never be consumed. If a sparrow should but fetch a drop of water out of the sea once a day, yea, once in 1,000 years, yet in time it would be exhausted. Oh, but God is such a sea, such an ocean, that if every angel in heaven and every saint and sinner on earth should drink whole rivers at a draught, yet not one drop could be diminished. If a child should take but a cockle shell of water out of the sea every day, the sea would be really the less, though not visibly the less, and in time it would be exhausted and drawn dry. But let all created beings be every day a drawing from God. Yet they shall never lessen him, they shall never draw him dry. The mother's breasts are often drawn dry, but the more you draw at the breasts of God, the more milk of grace and comfort will flow in upon you. Isaiah 66, Rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be ye glad with her, all ye that love her. Rejoice for thy joy with her, all ye that mourn for her, that ye may suck and be satisfied with the breasts of her consolation, that you may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. God keeps open house for all comers and goers, for all created creatures, both in heaven and earth. And though they are perpetually sucking at his breasts, yet the more they draw, the more the heavenly milk of divine joy, content, and satisfaction flows in abundantly upon them. Psalm 104, verse 24. All creatures, both high and low, rich and poor, honourable and base, noble and ignoble, bond and free, Jews and Gentiles, are all maintained upon God's own cost and charge. They are all fed at his table and maintained by what comes out of his treasury, his purse. And yet God is not a pin the poorer for all this. It would break and beggar all the princes on earth to keep but one day the least part of that innumerable company that God feeds and clothes and cherishes and maintains every day upon the account of his own revenue, which is never the poorer for all the vast expenses that he is daily at. There is still in God a fullness of abundance and a fullness of redundance, notwithstanding the vast sums that he hath and doth daily expend. It were blasphemy to think that God should be a penny the poorer by all that he hath laid out for the maintenance of those millions of angels and men that have had their dependence upon him from their first creation to this very day. Look, as the sun hath nevertheless light for filling the stars with light, And as the fountain hath nevertheless water, fulfilling the lesser vessels with water that are about it, so though God fills all the vessels, both of grace and glory, with his own fullness, yet he is nevertheless full himself. There is still in God plenitudo fontis, the fullness of a fountain. Look, as the overflowing fountain pours out water abundantly, and yet after all it remains full, so though the Lord be such an overflowing fountain as that he fills all, yet still he retains all fullness in himself. I have read of a Spanish ambassador that, coming to see the treasury of St. Mark in Venice, that is so much cried up in the world, he fell a-groping at the bottom of the chests and trunks to see whether they had any bottom, and being asked the reason why he did so, answered in this among other things, My master's treasure differs from yours, and excels yours, in that he hath no bottom as yours have, alluding to the mines in Mexico, Peru, and other parts of the western India. All men's mints, bags, purses, and coffers may be quickly exhausted and drawn dry, but God is such an inexhaustible portion that he can never be drawn dry. All God's treasures are bottomless, and all his mints are bottomless, and all his bags are bottomless. Millions of thousands in heaven and earth feed every day upon him, and yet he feels it not. He is still a-giving, and yet his purse is never empty. He is still a-filling all the court of heaven, and all the creatures on earth, and yet he is a fountain that still overflows. There be them that say that it is most certainly true of all the oil at Rheims, that though it be continually spent in the inauguration of their kings of France, yet it never wastes. But whatever truth is in this story, of this I am most sure, that though all the creatures in both worlds live and spend continually on Christ's stock, yet it never wasteth. And now all earthly portions are frequently exhausted and drawn dry. The prodigal quickly spent his patrimony upon his harlots in Luke 15, and how many drunkards and gluttons and wanters and gamesters and roysters do daily bring a noble to ninepence? Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, saith God to Job? Now, saith Gregory, the treasures of the snow are worldly riches, which men rake together, even as children do snow, which the next shower washeth away, and leaves nothing in the room of it but dirt. And how many merchants and shopkeepers and others in these breaking times have found all their riches and earthly portions to melt away as snow before the sun. How many of late have been very rich one week, and stripped of all the next, and set with Job upon the dunghill. All earthly portions are like water in a cistern, that may easily and quickly be drawn dry. But God is an inexhaustible portion that can never be drawn dry, and this discovers the excellency of this portion above all other portions. But 13thly, as God is an inexhaustible portion, so God is a soul-satisfying portion. In Psalm 17, verse 15, he is a portion that gives the soul full satisfaction and content. Psalm 16, verses 5 and 6, the Lord is the portion of mine inheritance, and of my cup. Thou maintainest my lot. The lines are fallen unto me in pleasant places. Yea, I have a goodly heritage. It was well with him, as his heart could wish. And so in that Psalm 73, verse 25, whom have I in heaven but thee? And there is none upon earth that I desire besides thee. Or as some render it, I would I were in heaven with thee. Or as others read the words, I have sought none in heaven or earth besides thee. Or as others, I desire none in heaven or earth besides thee. Or I affect none in heaven, nor none on earth like thee. I love none in heaven, nor none on earth in comparison of thee. I esteem thee instead of all other treasure, and above all other treasures that are in heaven or that are on earth. The holy prophet had spiritual and sweet communion with Christ to comfort and strengthen him. He had a guard of glorious angels to protect him and secure him, and he had assurance of heaven in his bosom to joy and rejoice him. And yet it was none of these, nay, it was not all these together that could satisfy him. It was only an infinite good, an infinite God, that could satisfy him. He very well knew that the substantials of all true happiness and blessedness did lie in God and his enjoyment of God. It was not his high dignities nor honours that could satisfy him. It was not the strength, riches, security, prosperity and outward glory of his kingdom that could satisfy him. It was not his delightful music, nor his noble attendants, nor his well-furnished tables, nor his great victories, nor his stately palaces, nor his pleasant gardens, nor his beautiful wife, nor his lovely children that could satisfy him. All these without God could never satisfy him. But God, without all these, was enough to quiet him and satisfy him. In John chapter 14, Philip said unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. A sight of God will satisfy a gracious soul more than all worldly contentments and enjoyments. Yea, one sight of God will satisfy a saint more than all the glory of heaven will do. God is the glory of heaven. Heaven alone is not sufficient to content a gracious soul, but God alone is sufficient to content and satisfy a gracious soul. God only is that satisfying good that is able to fill, quiet, content and satisfy an immortal soul. Certainly if there be enough in God to satisfy the spirits of just men made perfect, whose capacities are far greater than ours, in Hebrews 12, and if there be enough in God to satisfy the angels, whose capacities are far above theirs, if there be enough in God to satisfy Jesus Christ, whose capacity is unconceivable and unexpressible, yet if there be enough in God to satisfy himself, then certainly there must needs be in God enough to satisfy the souls of his people. If all fullness and all goodness and infiniteness will satisfy the soul, then God will. There is nothing beyond God imaginable, nor nothing beyond God desirable, nor nothing beyond God delectable, and therefore the soul that enjoys him cannot but be satisfied with him. God is a portion beyond all imagination, all expectation, all apprehension, and all comparison, and therefore he that hath him cannot but sit down and say, I have enough. Genesis 33, verse 11. My soul shall be satisfied as with marrow and fatness, and my mouth shall praise thee with joyful lips, when I remember thee upon my bed, and meditate on thee in the night watches. Psalm 63. Marrow and fatness cannot so satisfy the appetite as God can satisfy a gracious soul. Yea, one smile from God, one glance of his countenance, one good word from heaven, one report of love and grace, will infinitely more satisfy an immortal soul than all the fat and all the marrow and all the dainties and delicates of this world can satisfy the appetite of any mortal man. My soul shall be satisfied with fatness and fatness, so the Hebrew hath it. That is, my soul shall be top full of comfort. It shall be filled up to the brim with pleasure and delight in the remembrance and enjoyment of God upon my bed, or upon my beds in the plural, as the Hebrew hath it. David had many a hard bed and many a hard lodging, whilst he was in his wilderness condition. It oftentimes so fell out that he had nothing but the bare ground for his bed, and the stones for his pillows, and the hedges for his curtains, and the heavens for his canopy. Yet in this condition God was sweeter than marrow and fatness to him. Though his bed was never so hard, yet in God he had full satisfaction and content. Jeremiah chapter 31, My people shall be satisfied with goodness, saith the Lord, and my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus in Philippians 4, saith Paul, that great apostle of the Gentiles. The Greek word plerosai signifies to fill up, even as he did the widow's vessels in 2 Kings 4, till they did overflow. God will fill up all. He will make up all. He will supply all the wants and necessities of his people. That water that can fill the sea can much more fill a cup, and that sun which can fill the world with light can much more fill my house with light. So that God that fills heaven and earth with his glory can much more fill my soul with his glory. To show what a satisfying portion God is, he is set forth by all those things that may satisfy the heart of man, as by bread, water, wine, milk, honours, riches, raiment, houses, lands, friends, father, mother, sister, brother, health, wealth, light, life, and so on. And if these things will not satisfy, what will? It is enough, says old Jacob, that Joseph is alive. Genesis 45. So says a gracious soul, it is enough that God is my portion. A pardon cannot more satisfy a condemned man, nor bread an hungry man, nor drink a thirsty man, nor clothes a naked man, nor health a sick man, than God doth satisfy a gracious man. But now worldly portions can never satisfy the souls of men. In Ecclesiastes 5, he that loveth silver shall never be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase. This is also vanity. Some read the words thus, he that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, and he that loveth it in the multitude of it shall not have fruit. All the world cannot fill the soul, nor all the creatures in the world cannot stock the soul with complete satisfaction. As nothing can be the perfection of the soul but he that made it, so nothing can be the satisfaction of the soul but he that made it. If a man be hungry, silver cannot feed him. If naked, it cannot clothe him. If cold, it cannot warm him. If sick, it cannot recover him. If wounded, it cannot heal him. If weak, it cannot strengthen him. If fallen, it cannot raise him. If wandering, it cannot reduce him. Oh, how much less able is it, then, to satisfy him. He that out of love to silver seeketh after silver shall love still to seek it, but shall never be satisfied with it. A man shall as soon satisfy the grave and satisfy hell, and satisfy the stomach with wind, as he shall be able to satisfy his soul with any earthly portion. All earthly portions are dissatisfying portions. They do but vex and fret, gall and grieve, tear and torment the souls of men. The world is a circle, and the heart of man is a triangle, and no triangle can fill a circle. If the whole world were changed into a globe of gold, it could not fill one heart, it could not satisfy one immortal soul. Some good or other will be always wanting to that man that hath only outward good to live upon. Absalom's beauty could not satisfy him, nor Haman's honour could not satisfy him, nor Ahab's kingdom could not satisfy him, nor Balaam's gold could not satisfy him, nor Ahithophel's policy could not satisfy him, nor the scribes and Pharisees' learning could not satisfy them, nor Dives' riches could not satisfy him, nor Alexander's conquests could not satisfy him. For when, as he thought he had conquered one world, he sits down and wishes for another world to conquer. And Cyrus the Persian king was wont to say, did men but know the cares which he sustained under his imperial crown, he thought no man would stoop to take it up. Gillimex, king of the Vandals, when he was led in triumph by Belisarius, cried out, vanity of vanity, all is vanity. Charles V, emperor of Germany, whom of all men the world judged most happy, cried out with detestation to all his honours, riches, pleasures, trophies, Abite hinc, abite longe. Get you hence, let me hear no more of you. And it hath been long since said of our King Henry II, He whom alive the world could scarce suffice, when dead in 8-foot earth contented lies. By all these instances it is most evident that no earthly portions can satisfy the souls of men. Can a man fill up his chest with air? Or can he fill up the huge ocean with a drop of water? Or can a few drops of beer quench the thirst of a man in a burning fever? Or can the smell of meat, or the reeking fume of a ladle, or dreaming of a banquet satisfy an hungry stomach? No, no more can any earthly portions fill or satisfy the heart of man. If emptiness can fill the soul, if vanity can satisfy the soul, or if vexation can give content to the soul, then may earthly portions satisfy the soul, but not till then. When a man can gather grapes of thorns and figs of thistles, and turn day into night and winter into summer, then shall he find satisfaction in the creatures, but not before. All earthly portions are weighed in the balance of the sanctuary, and they are found to be lighter than the dust of the balance, and this will rather inflame the thirst than quench it. A man that hath only the world for his portion is like to Noah's dove out of the ark, that was in continual motion, but could find no resting place. But a man that hath God for his portion is like the dove returning and resting in the ark. The soul can never be at rest till it comes to rest and centre in God. God himself is the soul's only home. No good but the chiefest good can suffice an immortal soul. Look, as God never rested till he had made man, so man can never rest till he comes to enjoy God. The soul of man is of a very vast capacity, and nothing can fill it to the brim but he that is fullness itself. It is the breast and not the baby, nor the rattle, that will satisfy the hungry child, and it is God, and not this or that creature, that can satisfy the soul of man. But 14thly, as God is a soul-satisfying portion, so God is a permanent portion, an indefinite portion, a never-failing portion, a lasting, yea, an everlasting portion. Psalm 73, verse 26, My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength, or the rock of my heart, and my portion forever. God is a fountain which the hottest summer dries not, a bottomless treasure that can never be expended. God ever was and ever will be. He cannot borrow his being from anything, who gives being and well-being to all things. God is Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. He is yesterday and today, and the same forever. Revelation 1 verse 8, God is the Almighty, which is, and which was, and which is to come. All the differences of time are united by some to connote the eternity of God. In Exodus chapter 3 and verse 14, And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, Thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. Some translate this text according to the full scope of the future amongst the Hebrews. I am, that I was, and that I will be. For the future amongst the Hebrews points at all differences of time, past, present, and to come. But others, observing the strict and proper signification of the future, translate it thus, I will be, that I will be. This name of God imports two of God's incommunicable attributes. First, his eternity, when he saith, I will be. Secondly, his immutability, when he saith, that I will be. The rabbins upon this text express themselves after this manner. The blessed God said unto Moses, Say unto them, I that have been, and I the same now, and I the same for time to come, and so on. But others, more agreeable to the Chaldee paraphrase, express themselves thus, I, he that is, and was, and hereafter will be, hath sent me unto you. But it is observable that the angel of the waters unites all differences of time in that great and glorious acknowledgment of Revelation 16, Thou art righteous, O Lord, which art, and wast, and shalt be, because thou hast judged thus. God is a God of that infinite excellency and glory that it is utterly impossible for him to be better or other than he is. If God should in the least be alterable or mutable, he would presently cease to be God. God is a God of that transcendent excellency that there can be nothing added to him, nor nothing subtracted from him. If you add anything to him, you deny him to be God, and if you take anything from him, you destroy his being. James chapter 1 verse 17 and Psalm 90 verse 2. From everlasting to everlasting thou art God. And Mary hath chosen the better part, which shall never be taken from her. Luke chapter 10. God is eternal, as neither being capable of a beginning nor ending. And therefore the Egyptians used to signify God by a circle, and the Persians thought that they honoured God most when going up to the top of the highest tower they called him the circle of heaven. Now you know a circle hath no end, and it was a custom among the Turks to go up every morning to a high tower and to cry out, God always was and always will be, and so salute their Mohammed. Some things have a beginning but no ending, as angels and the souls of men, and some things have no beginning and yet have an end, as the decrees of God in their final accomplishment, and some things have both a beginning and an ending, as all sublunary things. But God hath neither beginning nor ending. All creatures have a lasting, angels have an outlasting, but God hath an everlasting being. 1 Timothy chapter 1. Now unto the God eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God, be honour and glory for ever and ever. Amen. God is without beginning and end, first and last, past and to come. Psalm 102. Of old hast thou laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of thy hands. They shall perish, but thou shalt endure. Yea, all of them shall wax old like a garment. As a vesture shalt thou change them, and they shall be changed. But thou art the same, and thy years shall have no end. Were there no other scripture to prove the eternity and immutability of God, this were enough. He that made heaven and earth must needs be before them, and therefore eternal. Whatever changes may pass upon the heavens and the earth, yet God will always remain unchangeable and unalterable. By what hath been said, it is most evident that God is an everlasting portion, that he is a never-failing portion. But now all earthly portions are very uncertain. Now they are, and anon they are not. Proverbs 23. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle towards heaven. Though the foolish world call riches substance, yet they have no solid subsistence. All earthly portions are as transitory as a shadow, a ship, a bubble, a bird, a dream, an arrow, a post that passeth swiftly away. Riches were never true to any that have trusted in them. In this text, riches are said not to be because they do not continue to be. They will not abide by a man, they will not long continue with a man, and therefore they are as if they were not. Crassus was so rich that he maintained an army with his own revenues. Yet he, his great army, with his son and heir, fell together, and so his great estate fell to others. All earthly things are vain and transitory. They are rather shows and shadows than real things themselves. In 1 Corinthians 7, for the fashion of this world passeth away. The Greek word schema signifies a mathematical figure, which is a mere notion and nothing in substance. All the glory of this world is rather a matter of fashion than of substance. It is a body without a soul. It is a golden shell without a kernel. It is a show without a substance. There is no firmness, there is no solidness, there is no consistency. There is no constancy in any of the creatures. All the pomp and state and glory of the world is but a mere piece of pageantry, a mask, a comedy, a fantasy. In Acts 25, and on the morrow when Agrippa was come, and Bernice with great pomp. The original words, meta polis pantasias, signifies great fantasy or vain show. The greatest glory and pomp of this world in the eye of God, in the account of God, is but as a fantasy or a shadow. It was a custom in Rome that when the emperor went by upon some great day in all his imperial pomp, there was an officer appointed to burn flax before him, and to cry out, Sic transit gloria mundi, so the glory of this world passeth away. And this was purposely done to put him in mind that all his honour, pomp, glory, and grandeur should soon pass and vanish away, as the flax did that he saw burnt before his eyes. That great conqueror of the world, Alexander, caused a sword in the compass of a wheel to be painted upon a table, to show that what he had gotten by the sword was subject to be turned about by the wheel of fortune. And many great conquerors besides him have found it so, and many now alive have seen it so. Look, as the rainbow shows itself in all its dainty colours, and then vanisheth away, so doth all worldly honours, riches, and preferments show themselves and then vanish away. And how many in our days have found it so? When one was commending the riches and wealth of merchants, I do not love that wealth, said an heathen, which hangs upon ropes, for if they break, the ship and all her wealth miscarries. Certainly within these few months the miscarrying of several ships hath caused several merchants sadly to miscarry. A storm at sea, a spark of fire, an unfaithful servant, a false oath, or a treacherous friend may quickly bring a man to sit with Job upon a dunghill. Look, as the bird flies from tree to tree, and as the beggar goes from door to door, and as the pilgrim travels from place to place, and as the physician walks from patient to patient, so all the riches, honours, and glory of this world do either fly from man to man, or else walk from man to man. Who knows not that many times one is made honourable by another's disgrace, another is made full by another man's emptiness, and a third is made rich by another's poverty? How soon is the courtier's glory eclipsed, if the prince doth but frown upon him, and how soon doth the prince become a peasant, if God doth but frown upon him? Now one is exalted, and anon he is debased. Now one is full, and anon he is hungry. Now one is clothed gloriously, and anon he is clothed with rags. Now one is at liberty, and anon he is under restraint. Now a man hath many friends, and anon he hath never a friend. There is nothing but vanity and uncertainty in all earthly portions. 15thly and lastly, as God is a permanent and never-failing portion, so God is an incomparable portion, and this follows clearly and roundly upon what hath been said. For if God be a permanent and an everlasting portion, then it must very necessarily follow that God is an incomparable portion. But such a portion God is, as I have proved at large, and therefore beyond all dispute, God must needs be an incomparable portion. Proverbs chapter 3, Happy is the man that findeth wisdom, that is, the Lord Jesus Christ, and the man that getteth understanding. For the merchandise of it is better than the merchandise of silver, and the gain thereof than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared to her. All the gold of Ophir, and all the silver of the Indies, which are but the guts and garbage of the earth, are nothing, yea, less than nothing, compared with God. God is a portion more precious than all those things which are esteemed most precious. A man may desire, what not? He may desire that all the mountains in the world may be turned into mountains of gold for his use. He may desire that all the rocks in the world may be turned into the richest pearls for his use. He may desire that all the treasure that is buried in the sea may be brought into his treasuries. He may desire that all the crowns and sceptres of all the princes and emperors of the world may be piled up at his gate, as they were once said to be at Alexander's. Yet all these things are not comparable to a saint's portion. Yea, they are not to be named in that day, wherein the excellency of a saint's portion is set forth. Horace writes of a precious stone that was more worth than 20,000 shekels, and Pliny valued the 2 precious pearls of Cleopatra at 1,200,000 shekels. But what were these, and what were all other precious stones in the world but dung and dross in comparison of a saint's portion? I have read a story of a man whom Chrysostom did feign to be in prison. "O," saith he, "if I had but liberty, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, if I had but for necessity, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, had I for a little variety, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, had I any office, were it the meanest, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, had I but a magistracy, though over one town only, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, were I a prince, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, were I but a king, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, were I but an emperor, I would desire no more." He had it. "Oh, then, were I but emperor of the whole world, I would then desire no more." He had it. And yet then he sits down with Alexander and weeps that there are no more worlds for him to possess. Now did any man enjoy what he is said to desire, it would be but a very mean portion compared with God. We may truly say of all the honours, riches, greatness, grandeur and glory of this world, compared with God, as Gideon sometimes says of the vintage of Abiezer, "The gleanings of Ephraim are better than the vintage of Abiezer." Judges chapter 8. So the very gleanings, yea, the smallest gatherings of God, are far better and more excellent and transcendent. They are more satisfying, more delighting, more ravishing, more quieting, and more contenting than all earthly portions are or can be. What comparison is there between a drop of a bucket and the vast ocean? Between a weak drop, which, recollecting all its force, yet hath not strength enough to fall, and the mighty waters? Oh, what comparison is there between the dust of the balance and the whole earth? Why, you will say, there is no comparison between these things. And I will say, there is less between all finite portions and such an infinite portion as God is. For this is most certain, that there must needs be always an infinite distance between what is finite and what is infinite. And such a portion God is. By all that hath been said, it is most evident that God is an incomparable portion. But now all earthly portions are comparable portions. You may easily and safely compare one earthly portion with another. One prince's revenues may be comparable to another's, and one great man's lordships may be comparable to another's, and one merchant's estate may be comparable to another's, and one gentleman's lands may be comparable to another's, and one wife's portion may be comparable to another's, and one child's portion may be comparable to another's. But God is an incomparable portion. There is no comparison to be made between God and other portions. And thus I have, in these 15 particulars, fully discovered the excellency of the saint's portion above all other portions. And therefore I shall now come to the second thing, that is to show you upon what grounds their title unto God as their portion is founded and bottomed. And they are these that follow. First, the free favour and love of God, the goodwill and pleasure of God, is the true ground and foundation of God's bestowing of himself as a portion upon his people. Deuteronomy chapter 7. There was no loveliness nor comeliness in them that should move him to bestow himself upon them. Ezekiel 16, verses 1 to 15. They had neither portion nor proportion, and therefore there was no cause in them why God should bestow himself as a portion upon them. God, for the glory of his own free grace and love, hath bestowed himself as a portion upon those who have deserved to have their portion amongst devils and damned spirits, in those torments that are endless, ceaseless, and remediless. The ethnics feign that their gods and goddesses loved some certain trees, for some lovely good that was in them. For Jupiter loved the oak for durance, and Neptune the cedar for stature, and Apollo the laurel for greenness, and Venus the poplar for whiteness, and Pallas the vine for fruitfulness. But what should move the God of gods to love us, who were so unworthy, so filthy, so empty, so beggarly? There were trees indeed, but such as Jude mentions, corrupt, fruitless, twice dead, and plucked up by the roots. The question may be resolved in 3 words: amat, quia amat. He loves us because he loves us. The root of all divine love to us lieth only in the bosom of God. But secondly, their title to God as their portion is founded upon God's free and voluntary donation of himself to them in the covenant of grace. Ezekiel chapter 11 and Hebrews 8. In the covenant of grace God hath freely bestowed himself upon his people. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, that I will not turn away from them to do them good. But I will put my fear in their hearts, that they shall not depart from me. Jeremiah 32. The covenant of grace is the great charter. It is the Magna Carta of all the saints' spiritual privileges and immunities. Now in this great charter the Lord hath proclaimed himself to be his people's God. Jeremiah 10, the portion of Jacob is the former of all things. The Lord of hosts is his name. He who formed all things, even the Lord of hosts, is the portion of Jacob, and he is Jacob's portion by virtue of that covenant of grace, which is a free, a full, a rich, and an everlasting covenant. A covenant that he will never break, nor alter, nor falsify. A covenant that he hath sworn to make good, as you may see by comparing the scriptures in the margin together. Psalm 89, Isaiah chapter 54, and so on. That covenant of grace, whereby God gives himself to be his people's God and portion, he is bound to make good by his oath. And therefore certainly whoever is forsworn, God will never be forsworn. The Egyptians, though heathens, so hated perjury, that if any man did but swear by the life of the king, and did not perform his oath, that man was to die, and no gold was to redeem his life, as Paulus Phagius observeth in his comment on Genesis. To think that God will not make good that covenant that he hath bound himself by oath to make good, is blasphemy. Yea, it is to debase him below the very heathens. All laws, both divine and human, have left no such bond of assurance to tie and fasten one to another as that of an oath or covenant, which as they are to be taken in sincerity, so they are to be kept inviolably. Certainly the covenant and oath of the great God is not like a gypsy's knot, that is fast or loose at pleasure. Whoever breaks with him, yet he will be sure, faithfully and inviolably, to keep his covenant and his oath with his. But thirdly, their title to God as their God and portion is founded and bottomed upon that marriage union that is between God and his people. Jeremiah chapter 3, Hosea chapter 2, from verse 19, And I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness, and in judgment, and in loving kindness, and in mercies. I will betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know the Lord. And I will sow her unto me in the earth, and I will have mercy upon her that had not obtained mercy. And I will say to them that are not my people, Thou art my people, and they shall say, Thou art my God. This threefold repetition, I will betroth thee, I will betroth thee, I will betroth thee, notes three things. First, the certainty of their marriage union and communion with God. Secondly, the excellency and dignity of their marriage union and communion with God. And thirdly, the difficulty of believing their marriage union and communion with God. There is nothing that Satan doth so much envy and oppose as he doth the soul's marriage union and communion with God. And therefore God fetches it over again and again and again, I will betroth thee unto me. And so in Isaiah 61, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord, my soul shall be joyful in my God. For he hath clothed me with the garments of salvation, he hath covered me with the robe of righteousness, as a bridegroom decketh himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorneth herself with her jewels. And so in chapter 62 and verse 5, For as a young man marrieth a virgin, so shall thy sons marry thee. And as a bridegroom rejoiceth over the bride, so shall thy God rejoice over thee. I have read of 5 sisters of the same birth, pedigree, and race, whereof one was married to a knight, another to an earl, a third to a gentleman, a fourth to a mean man, and the fifth to a filthy beggar. Though they were all alike by birth and descent, yet their difference did lie in their marriage. We are all alike by creation, by the fall, by nature, and by the first birth. It is only our marriage union and communion with God that differences us from others, and that exalts and lifts us up above others. Look, as the husband is the wife's by marriage union and communion, so God is the believer's God and portion by virtue of that marriage union and communion that is between God and the believer. What was said by one of the rabbins concerning Methuselah's wife, that she had 9 husbands in one, is very applicable to the believer that hath God for his husband, and let thus much suffice for the second thing. I shall come now to the third thing, and that is to make some improvement of this blessed and glorious truth to ourselves. And therefore, is it so that God is the saint's portion, and that he is such an excellent and such a transcendent portion above all other portions, as hath been fully evidenced? Then first, let not the saints that have God for their portion fret and vex themselves, because of those earthly portions that God commonly bestows upon the worst of men. There is a great aptness in the best of men to envy those earthly portions that God often bestows upon the worst of men. The lights of the sanctuary have burnt dim. Stars of no small magnitude have twinkled. Men of eminent parts, famous in their generations for faith and piety, have staggered in their judgments to see the flourishing state of the wicked. It made Job to complain in Job 21 and chapter 24, Jeremiah to expostulate with God in chapter 12, and David even to faint and sink in Psalm 73. To see the prosperity of the ungodly, to see the wicked in wealth and the saints in want, the wicked in their robes and the saints in their rags, the wicked honoured and the saints despised, the wicked exalted and the saints debased, the wicked upon thrones and saints upon dunghills, is a sight that hath sadly put the best of men sometimes to it. But this is a temper of spirit that doth no ways become those that have God for their portion, and therefore the psalmist in the 37th psalm cautions the saints against it no less than 3 several times, as you may see in verses 1, 7, and 8. There is nothing that doth so ill become a saint that hath God for his portion, as to be sick of the frets, and to prevent this mischief, this sickness, the precept is doubled and redoubled. Fret not, fret not, fret not. Though they that have sore eyes are offended at bright clear lights, yet they that have God for their portion should never fret or fume, storm or rage because some are greater than they, or richer than they, or higher than they, or more honourable than they, because all their prosperity is nothing but an unhappy happiness. It is nothing but a banquet like Haman's before execution. And what man is there that is in his wits, that would envy a malefactor who meets with honourable entertainment as he is going along to execution. All a wicked man's delicate meats, his fine bits and his murdering morsels, are sauced, and all his pleasant and delightful drinks are spiced with the wrath and displeasure of an angry God. And why then should you fret and vex at their prosperity? What madness and folly would it be in a man that is heir to many thousands per annum, to envy a stage player that is clothed in the habit of a king, but yet not heir to 1 foot of land, no, nor worth 1 penny in all the world, and who at night must put off his royal apparel, and the next day put on his beggarly habit? O sirs, it will be but a little while before the great God will disrobe the wicked of all their prosperity, felicity, and worldly glory, and clothe them with the rags of shame, scorn, and contempt forever. And therefore, oh, what folly and madness would it be for those that are heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, of all the glory of heaven, to envy the prosperity of the wicked. Romans 8 and verse 17. The prosperity of the wicked lays them open to the worst and greatest sins. First, it lays them open to all uncleanness and filthiness, as Jeremiah 5. Secondly, it lays them open to pride and contempt of God, as in Psalm 73. Thirdly, it lays them open to vex, oppress, tyrannize, persecute, insult, and triumph over the poor people of God, as you may see in Pharaoh, Saul, Ahab, Jezebel, Haman, and the scribes and Pharisees. Fourthly, it lays them open to a neglect and slighting of the ways of God and of the ordinances of God, in Job 21 and so on. When the Protestants in France were in their prosperity, they slighted powerful preachings and so on, and began to affect a vain, frothy way of preaching and living, which ushered in the massacre upon them. Moulin hit it when, speaking of the French Protestants, he said, "When the Papists hurt us and persecute us for reading the Scriptures, we burn with zeal to be reading of them. But now persecution is over, our Bibles are like old almanacs." Fifthly, it lays them open to a stupidness, unmindfulness, and forgetfulness of the afflictions of the people of God. Amos chapter 6. Pharaoh's chief butler was no sooner set down in the seat of prosperity, but quite contrary to his promise, he easily forgets Joseph in misery. Sixthly, it layeth them open to dreadful apostasy from the ways and worship of God. Deuteronomy 32. No sooner was Israel possessed of the good land that flowed with milk and honey, but they forsook the true worship of God, and fell to the worshipping of idols, for which at last the good land spewed them out, as a generation cursed and abhorred by God. Seventhly, it lays them open to all carnal security, as you may see in the old world. Their prosperity cast them into a bed of security, and their security ushered in a flood of sin, and that flood of sin ushered in a flood of wrath. Matthew 24. Eighthly, it lays them open to idolatry, which is a God-provoking and a land-destroying sin. Hosea chapter 2. Ah, sirs, who can seriously consider of the dreadful sins that the prosperity of the wicked lays them open to, and yet fret and vex at their prosperity? Again, as their prosperity lays them open to the greatest sins, so their prosperity lays them open to the greatest temptations. Witness their tempting of themselves and their own lusts, and witness their temptings of others to the worst of wickedness and villainies, and witness their frequent tempting and provoking of the great God to his own face, and witness their daily, yea, their hourly tempting of Satan to tempt their own souls. O sirs, as there is no condition that lays persons open to such great transgressions as prosperity doth, so there is no condition that lays persons open to such horrid temptations as prosperity doth. And why then should God's holy ones envy wicked men's prosperity and worldly glory? Again, their prosperity and worldly felicity and glory is all the portion and all the heaven and happiness that ever they are like to have. Psalm 17, verse 14, from men of the world which have their portion in this life. Certainly men whose hearts are worldly, whose minds are worldly, whose spirits are worldly, whose desires are worldly, whose hopes are worldly, and whose main ends are worldly, have only the world for their portion. And what a pitiful, perishing portion is that! Men that choose the world as their portion, and that delight in the world as their portion, and that trust to the world as their portion, and that in straits run to the world as their portion, and that take content and satisfaction in the world as their portion, doubtless these have never known what it is to have God for their portion. That is a very heart-cutting and soul-killing word that you have in Matthew 6. Verily I say unto you that they have their reward. The scribes and Pharisees propose to themselves the eyes of men, the praise of men, and the applause of men for a reward of their alms. And Christ tells them that they have their reward, not God's reward, but theirs. That is, that reward that they had propounded to themselves as the prime and ultimate end of their actions. And doubtless that word was a thunderbolt to Dives. Son, remember that thou in thy lifetime received thy good things, and likewise Lazarus his evil, in Luke 16. Wicked men have their best here, their worst is to come. They have their comforts here, their torments are to come. They have their joys here, their sorrows are to come. They have their heaven here, their hell is to come. Gregory, being advanced to great preferment, professed that there was no scripture that struck so much terror and trembling into his heart as that scripture did, "Here you have your reward." Had wicked men but their eyes in their heads and a little understanding in their hearts, and life in their consciences, they would quickly conclude that it is hell on this side hell for a man to have his portion in this world. And why then should you envy the prosperity of the wicked? Again, all their prosperity is cursed unto them, as you may see by comparing the scriptures in the margin together, from Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, and so on. All their comforts are cursed without doors, and all their comforts are cursed within doors. There are snares on all their tables, and poison in all their cups, and the plague in all their brave clothes. Dionysius the tyrant, to show Damocles, one of his flatterers, the felicity, or rather the infelicity of a king, attired him as a king, and set him at the table, served as a king. And whilst he was in his imperial robes, he caused a naked sword with the point downward to be hung just over his head by a horsehair, which made Damocles to tremble, and to forbear both meat and mirth. Though the feast was a royal feast, and the attendants royal attendants, and the music royal music, yet Damocles, for his life, could not taste of any of those varieties that were before him, nor take any comfort or contentment in any other part of his royal entertainment, because of the sword that hung but by a single hair over his head. O sirs, a sword, a sharp sword, a two-edged sword, a sword of displeasure, a sword of wrath, a sword of vengeance, hangs over the head of every wicked person when he is in his most prosperous and flourishing condition. And had sinners but eyes to see this sword, it would be as the handwriting upon the wall. It would cause their thoughts to be troubled, and their countenances to be changed, and their joints to be loosed, and their knees to be dashed one against another. And why then should Christians fret and vex at the prosperity of the wicked? Again, when wicked men are at the highest, then are they nearest their fall, as you may see in that 37th Psalm and that 73rd Psalm, and in those great instances of Pharaoh, Adonai-Bezek, Ben-Hadad, Ahab, Sennacherib, Haman, Nebuchadnezzar, Belshazzar, and Herod. Look, as the ship is soonest cast away when she is top and top gallant, so when wicked men are top and top gallant, when they are at the height of all their pomp, bravery, and worldly glory, then God usually tumbles them down into the very gulf of misery. The great ones of the world have suddenly fallen from their highest honours and dignities, and have been sorely and sadly exercised with the greatest scorns and calamities. Let me give you this in a few remarkable instances. Valerian, the Roman emperor, fell from being an emperor to be a footstool to Sapor, the king of Persia, as often as he took horse. Valens, the emperor, a furious Arian, being wounded in a fight with the Goths, in his flight he betook himself to a poor cottage, wherein he was burnt by the Goths. Aurelianus, the Roman emperor, brought Tetrius, his opposite, and the noble queen Zenobia of Palmyrena, in triumph to Rome in golden chains. Bajazet, a proud emperor of the Turks, being taken prisoner by Tamburlaine, a Tartarian emperor, he bound him in chains of gold and used him for a footstool when he took horse, and when he ate meat, he made him gather crumbs under his table and ate them for his food. Caesar, having bathed his sword in the blood of the Senate and his own countrymen, is, after a while, miserably murdered in the Senate by his own friends, Cassius and Brutus, to show that they are but the scourges and rods of the Almighty, which he will cast into the fire as soon as he hath done with them. The victorious Emperor Henry IV, who in 62 pitched battles for the most part became victorious, fell to that poverty and misery before he died, that he was forced to petition to be prebend in the church of Spire, to maintain him in his old age, which the bishop of that place denied him. Whereupon he brake forth into that speech of Job, Have pity upon me, O my friends, for the hand of the Lord hath touched me. Job 19, verse 21. He died of grief and want. And Procopius reports of King Gedemir, who was sometimes a potent king of the Vandals, that he was brought so low as to entreat his friend to send him a sponge, a loaf of bread, and an harp, a sponge to dry up his tears, a loaf of bread to maintain his life, and an harp to solace himself in his misery. Dionysius, king of Sicily, was such a cruel tyrant that his people banished him. After his banishment, he went to Corinth, where he lived a base and contemptible life. At last he became a schoolmaster, that so, when he could no longer tyrannize over men, he might over boys. Great Pompey, that used to boast that he could raise all Italy in arms with a stamp of his foot, had not so much as room to be buried in. And William the Conqueror's corpse lay 3 days unburied, his interment being hindered by one that claimed the ground to be his. And Pythias pined to death for want of bread, who once was able to entertain and maintain Xerxes' mighty army. And Philip de Comines reports of a Duke of Exeter, who, though he had married Edward IV's sister, yet he saw him in the Low Countries begging barefoot. And so Belisarius, a most famous general, and the only man living in his time for glorious victories, riches, and renown, yet in his old age he had his eyes put out by the Empress Theodora, and being led at last in a string, he was forced to cry out, Date panem Belisario, give a crust to old blind Belisarius, whom virtue advanced but envy hath brought into this great misery. By all these royal instances you see the truth of that which once a royal slave hinted to Sesostris. The story runs thus. Sesostris, having taken many of his neighbour kings prisoners, made them to draw his chariot by turns. Now it so happened that one of these royal slaves, as he was drawing in the chariot, had his eye almost continually fixed on the wheels, which Sesostris, observing, asked him why he looked so seriously upon the wheels. He answered that the falling of that spoke lowest, which was even now highest, put him in mind of the instability of fortune. Sesostris, duly weighing the parable, would never after be drawn by his royal slaves any more. By what hath been said, it is more evident that when wicked men are highest, they are nearest their fall, and that none fall so certainly and so suddenly, and under such dreadful calamities and miseries, as those that have been the most highly advanced in all worldly dignities and glories. And why then should any fret or vex at their outward prosperity or worldly felicity? Again, God will bring them to an account for all those talents of power, of honour, of riches, of trust, of time, of interest, that God hath given them in the world. And the more they have employed the liberality and bounty of God against God for his glory, or interest, or people, the shorter shall be their felicity, and the more endless shall be their misery. Matthew 25. The greatest account and the greatest damnation commonly attends the great ones of the world. I have read of Philip III of Spain, whose life was free from gross evils, professing that he would rather lose all his kingdom than offend God willingly. Yet being in the agony of death and considering more thoroughly of that account he was to give to God, fear struck him, and these words break from him: "O would to God I had never reigned. Oh, that those years I have spent in my kingdom I had lived a private life in the wilderness. Oh, that I had lived a solitary life with God. How much more confidently should I have gone to the throne of God? What doth all my glory profit me now, but that I have so much the more torment in my death, and the greater account to give up to God?" I have read of a soldier who, being to die for taking a bunch of grapes contrary to his general's command, as he was going along to execution, he went eating of his grapes. Whereupon one of his fellow soldiers rebuked him, saying, "What, are you eating your grapes now you are going to execution?" The poor fellow replied, "Prithee, friend, do not envy me my grapes, for I shall pay a dear price for them. I shall lose my life for them." And so accordingly he did. So I say, O you that have God for your portion, do not envy, do not fret and vex at the prosperity of the wicked. For what though they have more than their heart can wish? What though they live in pleasure and wallow in all carnal and sensual delights? Yet they have a sad account to give up to God, and they shall pay dear at last for all their worldly enjoyments. For without sound repentance on their sides, and pardoning grace on God's, they shall not only lose their lives, but they shall also forever lose their immortal souls, and therefore never fret at their prosperity. O sirs, do you not remember that Lazarus did not fret nor fume because Dives had robes for his rags, and delicates for his scraps? For he very well knew that though he was sine domo, yet not sine domino. He had a guard of glorious angels to transport his holy, precious, heaven-born soul into Abraham's bosom. He knew that it was better to beg on earth than to beg in hell. O sirs, what is darkness to light, earth to heaven, chaff to wheat, tin to silver, dross to gold, or pebbles to pearls? No more are all earthly portions to that God who is the saints' portion, and therefore let not the saints that have such a matchless portion envy the prosperity and felicity of wicked men. It is the justice of envy to kill and torment the envious, and therefore shun it as you would poison in your meat, or a serpent in the way. A man were better have a serpent tumbling up and down in his bowels, than to have envy and gnawing in his soul. Envy is as pernicious a wickedness as it is a foolish and a groundless wickedness. Envy is a scourge to scourge the soul. It is a serpent to sting the soul. It is a poison to swell the soul. It is a sore to sore the soul. It is a moth that corrupts the soul, and it is a canker that eats up the soul. And therefore fly from it, as you would fly from the most cruel and destroying adversary. O sirs, to be angry because God is bountiful to others, to frown because God smiles upon others, to be bitter because God is sweet in his dealings with others, and to sigh because God multiplies favours and blessings upon others? What is this but to turn others' good into our own hurt, others' glory and mercy into our own punishment and torment? And if this be not to create a hell in our own hearts, I am much mistaken. I shall conclude this first inference with the counsel of the prophet that is found in Psalm 49, verses 16 and 17. Be not thou afraid when one is made rich, when the glory of his house is increased. For when he dieth, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. When the bodies of the wicked are rotting in their graves, and their souls are roaring in hell, none of their worldly greatness, pomp, state, glory, gallantry, riches, rents, or revenues shall descend after them, to administer one drop of comfort to them, and therefore never envy their outward prosperity or worldly glory. But secondly, if the saints have such an excellent, such a transcendent, and such a matchless portion, then let them be content with their present condition. Let them sit down satisfied and contented, though they have but a handful of meal in their barrel and a little oil in their cruse. O sirs, in having of God you have much. In having of God you have enough. In having of God you have all. And why then should you not sit down quiet with your present allowance? Certainly if much will not satisfy you, if enough will not satisfy you, if all will not satisfy you, nothing will satisfy you. Hebrews 13, let your conversation be without covetousness, or love of silver as the Greek word signifies, and be content with such things as you have. Or as the Greek hath it, archumeni tis parousin, be content with present things. For he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. There are 5 negatives in the Greek. I will not leave thee nor forsake thee. Fully to assure and fully to satisfy the people of God that he will never forsake them, and that he will everlastingly stick close to them. What doth this unparalleled gemination, I will never import but this, I will ever, yea, and forever and ever, take care of thee, and look after thee, and be mindful of thee. Though they had changed their glory for contempt in Hebrews 11, their fine raiment for sheepskins and goatskins, their silver for brass, their plenty for scarcity, their fullness for emptiness, their stately houses for holes and caves and dens of the earth, yet they are to be contented and satisfied with present things, upon this very ground that God will always cleave to them, and that he will never turn his back upon them. The Hebrews had been stripped and plundered of all their goods that were good for anything, and yet they must be contented, they must sit down satisfied, with their hands upon their mouths, though all were gone. Hebrews 10, verse 34. Though men cannot bring their means to their minds, yet they must bring their minds to their means, and then they will sit down in silence, though they have but a rag on their backs, a penny in their purse, and a crust in their cupboards. O sirs, a little will serve nature, less will serve grace, though nothing will serve men's lusts. And why then should not Christians be contented with little? Nature is content with a little, as not to starve, not to thirst, saith Galen. O friends, you have but a short journey to go. You have but a little way home, and a little will serve to bear your charges till you come to heaven, and therefore be contented with a little. To have more than will serve to bring a man to his journey's end is but a burden. One staff is helpful to a man in his journey, but a bundle is hurtful, and this doubtless Jacob well understood when he made that proposal in Genesis 28. If God will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, then shall the Lord be my God. Jacob doth not say, If God will give me delicates and junkets to eat, he shall be my God. Oh no! But if he will give me but bread to eat, though it be never so coarse, and never so black, and never so dry, he shall be my God. He doth not say, If God will give me so many hundreds, or so many thousands a year, he shall be my God. Oh no! But if he will give me bread to eat, he shall be my God. Nor he doth not say, If God will give me so many £100 in my purse, a comfortable habitation, and a thriving trade, he shall be my God. Oh no! But if he will give me bread to eat, he shall be my God. Nor he doth not say, If God will give me costly apparel, or rich and royal raiment to put on, he shall be my God. Oh no! But if God will give me raiment to put on, though it be never so mean and poor, he shall be my God. If Jacob may but have a little bread to feed him, and a few clothes to cover him, it is as much as he looks for. Look, as a wicked man, in the fullness of his sufficiency, is in straits, as Job tells us in chapter 20, so a holy man, in the fullness of his straits, enjoys an all-sufficiency in God, as you may see in Jacob. O Christians, though you have but little, yet you have the highest and the noblest title that can be to that little that you do enjoy. For you hold all in capite, as the Apostle showeth in that large charter of a Christian, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, which the wicked do not. Now 100 a year upon a good title is a better estate than 1,000 a year upon a cracked, crazy title. Saints have the best title under heaven for all they enjoy, be it little or be it much. But all the titles that sinners have to their earthly enjoyments are but crazy titles. Yea, in comparison of the saints' titles, they are no titles. Again, that title that a saint hath, he hath it from the special love and favour of God. He hath it from a reconciled God. Proverbs chapter 15. Now a little from special love is better than a great deal from a general providence. A penny from a reconciled God is better than a pound from a bountiful God. A shilling from God as a father is a better estate than 100 from God as a creator. The kiss that a king gave to one in the story was a greater gift than the golden cup that he gave to another. A little with the kisses of God's mouth is better than all the gold of Ophir. Canticles chapter 1 verse 2. A drop of mercy from special love is better than a sea of mercy from common bounty. Look, as one draught of clear, sweet spring water is more pleasing, satisfying, and delightful to the palate than a sea of brackish salt water, so one draught out of the fountain of special grace is more pleasing, satisfying, and delightful to a gracious soul than a whole sea of mercy from a spring of common grace. And therefore do not wonder when you see a Christian sit down contented with a little. Again, that little that a Christian hath shall be certainly blessed and sanctified to him. 1 Timothy chapter 4 verses 3 to 5. Though thy mercies, O Christian, are never so few and never so mean, yet they shall assuredly be blessed unto thee. The Lord hath not only promised that he will bless thy blessings to thee, but he hath also sworn by himself that in blessing he will bless thee. And how darest thou then, O Christian, to think that the great and faithful God will be guilty of a lie, or, that which is worse, of perjury? Genesis chapter 22. Now a little blessed is better than a great deal cursed. A little blessed is better than a world enjoyed. A pound blessed is better than 1,000 cursed. A black crust blessed is better than a feast cursed. The gleanings blessed are better than the whole harvest cursed. A drop of mercy blessed is better than a sea of mercy cursed. Lazarus's crumbs blessed was better than Dives his delicates cursed. Jacob's little blessed unto him was better than Esau's great estate that was cursed unto him. It is always better to have scraps with a blessing than to have manna and quails with a curse. A thin table with a blessing is always better than a full table with a snare. Psalm 78. A threadbare coat with a blessing is better than a purple robe cursed. A hole, a cave, a den, a barn, a chimney corner with a blessing is better than stately palaces with a curse. A woolen cap blessed is better than a golden crown cursed. And it may be that emperor understood as much, that said of his crown when he looked on it with tears, "If you knew the cares that are under this crown, you would never stoop to take it up." And therefore why should not a Christian be contented with a little, seeing his little shall be blessed unto him? Isaac tills the ground and sows his seed, and God blesses him with 100-fold in Genesis chapter 26. And Cain tills the ground and sows his seed, but the earth is cursed to him, and commanded not to yield to him his strength in Genesis 4 verse 12. O therefore, never let a Christian murmur because he hath but a little, but rather let him be still a blessing of that God that hath blessed his little, and that doth bless his little, and that will bless his little to him. Again, that little estate that a righteous man hath is most commonly a more lasting, a more abiding, a more permanent, and a more enduring estate than the great and large estates of the wicked are. Proverbs 15. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the riches of many wicked. Psalm 37 verse 16. One old piece of gold is worth more than 1,000 new counters, and one box of pearls is worth more than many loads of pebbles, and 100 pounds a year forever is better than many hundreds in hand. It is very observable the psalmist doth not simply say the estate, but the rich estate. The riches not of one or a few, but of many wicked, are not comparable to that little that a righteous man hath. The Hebrew word hammon, that is here rendered riches, signifies also a multitude, or an abundance, or store of riches. A little that a righteous man hath is better than the multitude of riches, or the abundance of riches, or the store of riches that many wicked men have. And he gives you the reason of this in the 17th verse. For the arms of the wicked shall be broken, but he upholdeth or underprops the righteous. By the arms of the wicked you are to understand their strength, their valour, their power, their wit, their wealth, their abundance, which is all the arms they have to support and bear up themselves in the world with. Now these arms shall be broken, and when they are broken, then, even then, will God uphold the righteous. That is, God will be a continual overflowing fountain of good to his righteous ones, so that they shall never want, though all the springs of the wicked are dried up round about them. O sirs, there are so many moths and so many dangers and so many crosses and so many losses and so many curses that daily attends the great estates of wicked men, that they are very rarely long-lived. Ah, how many in this great city are there that have built their nests on high, and that have thought that they had laid up riches for many years, and that have said in their hearts that their lands and stocks and trades and houses and pompous estates should abide forever, who are now broken in pieces like a potter's vessel. Ah, how often doth the pride, the oppression, the lying, the cheating, the overreaching, the swearing, the cursing, the whoring, the covetousness, the drunkenness and the wantonness of the wicked cut the throat of all their mercies. These are the wickednesses that as a fire burns up all their outward enjoyments, and that turns their earthly paradise into a real hell. It is the wickedness of the wicked that causeth their prosperity to wither, and that provokes God to turn their plenty into scarcity, their glory into contempt, and their honour into shame. It is very observable that in the Holy Scriptures the prosperous estates of the wicked are frequently compared to things of an abrupt existence, to a shadow which soon passeth away, to chaff which a puff, a blast of wind, easily disperseth and scattereth, to grass which quickly withereth before the sun, to tops of corn which in an instant are cut off, to the unripe grape which on a sudden drops down, yea, to a dream in the night. And what is a dream but a quick fancy and a momentary vanity? All the riches that the wicked gain, either by their trades, or by their friends, or by their great places, or by their high offices, or by their subtle contrivances, or by their sinful compliances, and all the honour they gain in the court, or in the camp, or in the school, is but light and inconstant. It is but like the crackling of thorns under a pot. They are fading vanities, that commonly die before those that enjoy them are laid in the dust. O therefore let all Christians be contented with their little, seeing that their little shall outlast the large estates of wicked and ungodly men. A man that hath God for his portion can truly say that which no wicked man in the world can say. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Psalm 23. The psalmist doth not say that the goodness and mercy should follow him a day, or a few days, or many days, but that goodness and mercy should follow him all the days of his life. The Hebrew word radaf, that is here rendered to follow, signifies to persecute. Saith the psalmist, goodness and mercy shall follow me as the persecutor follows him that he persecutes. That is, it shall follow me frequently. It shall follow me constantly. It shall follow me swiftly. It shall follow me earnestly. It shall follow me unweariedly. The word signifies a studious, anxious, careful, diligent following. It is a metaphor that is taken from beasts and birds of prey that follow and fly after their prey with the greatest eagerness, closeness, and unweariedness imaginable. Why thus should mercy and loving kindness follow David all the days of his life? And if in a temptation he should prove so weak and so foolish as to run from goodness and mercy, yet goodness and mercy should follow him, like as the sun going down followeth the passenger that goeth eastward with his warm beams. Amen.